hero lunged like lightning, snaring the beast the instant it tumbled into his trap. He said he'd gone ages without sinking his teeth into real meat. He unleashed an ear-splitting scream the instant he spotted her. He spotted a massive boar that lunged in and began devouring his precious meat. Gritting his teeth, the hero realized this was exactly the devil's kingdom he'd braced for. Nothing here would be easy, and he kept asking himself why he'd chosen to live in such a hell. This whole saga kicked off just a few days ago. The man barked that he was a little late. The land had been sold 4 days ago. He froze, disbelief burning in his chest. This was the land he'd been coveting for years. He scraped and pinched for 3 years to save the required amount, and now those 5 coins were useless. The man grimaced, "These coins are filthy." The hero shot back, "Is there any other good soil?" They shook their heads and warned him. Land like that was nearly impossible to find, and he had only 5 gold coins. He brushed it off. Any patch of land would do. He'd even cobble together a shelter to sleep in if she had no house, ready to endure some inconveniences if they helped him. He snapped, "If that's the case, I've got something. It's worth exactly 5 coins and the land's enormous." An ancient forest huddled between towering mountains, jagged cliffs, and the roaring sea, miles away from the city's glow. The man hissed that no soul had ever set foot there. The place was untouched, unexplored, and completely unknown. Convinced he had nothing left to lose, he went all in and bought her out. Talent never found him. At 15, his family kicked him out, and he dove headfirst into adventuring just because it looked cool. Reality hit like a cold slap. It was anything but pleasant. Most of these so-called adventurers couldn't land a blow if their lives depended on it. They lived shackled to survival, grinding day to day to scrape by, and he worshipped the legendary adventurers who thundered into town now and then. Like them, he scraped by doing odd jobs, hoarding every coin so he could burn it later on fleeting thrills. He even toyed with ditching his profession to become an adventurer, but he had zero talent as a merchant or a craftsman. The hero dismissed it as useless, certain it would only make things worse. But then the boy remembered, even if he flailed as an adventurer, he was still a farmer's son. If he had his own land, he could forge something real. Stealing his resolve, he spent 3 grueling years scraping every scrap until, at last, 5 coins jingled in his hand. His own land lay under his feet, and a brand new life burst open before him. The knights soldiers of the Kingdom of Estonia demanded where he was heading, warned that nothing lay ahead but their training base, and he snapped that he'd bought some land there. The soldiers declared the area a virtually unexplored demonic realm and barked for him to flash his adventurer card. The adventurer's card blazed his name and rank, its material and color changing as ranks rose. His, though, was frozen at the lowest. They insisted he master survival skills in the nearby forest before he plunged into the devil's nest. He scoffed, convinced they were laughing at him. The forest's deep core marked his land, and the demon realm, far from crawling with monsters, sat shockingly calm. Monsters burst into combat before his eyes, a savage bear and a Vespa hornet, and now he couldn't defeat them. He dove into the bushes, peered through the leaves, and realized it was all over. Fear clenched the boy as the giant monsters loomed, then luck struck him out of nowhere. He had to gather materials. The hero snatched an arthropod eye and a wing, and a magic stone thudded into his hand. Every monster type carries a single stone, each pulsing with its own unique power, and monsters and demons embed those magic cores in their bodies to bend arcane forces and unleash their abilities. The Adventurers Guild courses beat it into him. Humans pull magic straight from nature. They don't have magic stones in their bodies. This magic stone was meant to unleash poison, but the lethal sting that should lurk in its belly is gone. The hero's gut lurch exploded into cold certainty. The sting was buried deep inside the bear. The guy vowed he'd carve the meat into pieces, strip off the skin, and let it dry a little, and the hero barely blinked. He was used to this from working in a butcher's shop. He snatched up the supplies: fur, meat, the poisonous sting of a hornet, and the magic stone of a bear. He cracked a grin, deciding this was a promising start. 3 more relentless days plunging deeper into the forest, and the hero finally arrived. Towering peaks and a boundless forest unfurled before him. The river carved the land's edge, and across its roar a different ecosystem pulsed to life. He declared everything was fine. It was time to take the first step into a new life. He gasped, asking if his eyes were betraying him. There, right before him, a local slime squelched into view. Dizziness slammed into him, his magic drained dry. One more hit and he'd faint from magical exhaustion. To beat the slime, you must smash the core at its center. He planned to pummel that core up close and blast it from range. At first he whiffed, the hoe completely dissolved, and the hero spat a curse. He crushed the slime, a slick tide of goo splashing across his face, and he whooped with victorious glee. He squandered a wild bear's pelt and reaped almost nothing, just a lone material magic slime stone. He shoved his anger aside and sprinted to pitch camp before night fell. The hero grinned and said that with a few branches and leaves, he'd lashed together a makeshift tent, while the forest brimmed with plants he'd never seen before. He slashed a palm leaf and sticky, slimy sap gushed out. Every other plant was useless for building a tent. The hero's breath snagged as he stumbled onto a blazing field of flowers right in the jungle's heart. He beheld the bones of monsters. He scowled at the place, he didn't like it, but snapped he'd deal with it later. First, he had to pitch camp. Night had already fallen, and the hero insisted everything was more or less normal for now, but his stomach roared with hunger. Relief roared through him. He'd hauled wild bear meat along. The forest's plants and animals bristle with strange secrets, and tomorrow he must dive headfirst into research to chart his next move. He froze as massive, glittering eyes locked onto him, terror ripping through his veins. A tiger, its coat a shocking, impossible green. The girl told him that if he met him unarmed, he had to steel himself. He would have to give his life. He hurled a chunk of poisoned meat straight at the tiger. The whole scheme imploded. The tiger snubbed the bait, snarling for nothing but fresh meat. The animal bolted after him, teeth bared and lungs roaring as it lunged to strike. The tiger lunged, its paw whipping inches from him. It missed. The guy drove the nail dead center. Terror clamped down on him and he steeled himself. It was over, he was finished. It was only day one of his new life, and fate had already slammed him so hard that any hope for the future was slipping away. Noise swelled into a savage roar as the monster barreled closer. Convinced he couldn't win the fight, the hero bolted. The danger was just too fierce to stay. The boy raced back to the village, resolve blazing, determined to start everything over from scratch. No such option stood before him. They scoffed at him, saying he wasn't needed and would only get in the way, that the adventurer's life was nothing but boring drudgery. The hero clenched his jaw, certain that fleeing wouldn't change a thing. He had nowhere else to turn. He clings to the only thing left, his life in that blasted wasteland, and that ruined land is all he has. The tiger closed in. If his plan collapsed, he'd be dead on the spot. Everything clicked into place, and his blood ran cold as he realized the flower garden was a natural trap. Those white, mysterious flowers breathed out a knockout haze that felled anyone who inhaled it. He plunged down and clamped his hand over his nose, convinced he had to avoid breathing them in. Victory exploded from the hero as he snatched the green tiger materials and clutched the magic stone. Hunger gnawed at him like a ravenous beast. He hadn't even grabbed a bite before everything went down. The guy recoiled and spat, "Green tiger meat is disgusting." He crashed onto the couch and blurted that he wanted something delicious to eat. The new territory battered him, but he swore he'd fight tooth and nail to hang on a little longer. That place is his private inferno. Every step there rips at his soul. He froze, utterly lost, no clue where he was or what was happening. A heaving crowd surged around him, and confusion slammed in. He had no clue what kind of place this was. He convinced himself it was just a bizarre dream. Since childhood, he'd lived this dream countless times, burning to know what it meant, and there the slime had already snatched his bag. He snatched an axe and swung with savage force, cleaving straight to his heart. Relief hit him like a freight train when he found his bag unscathed. He grinned, convinced he was getting stronger. He clenched his teeth and dove back into that hell to keep exploring. This was his land. He demanded to know where every last thing lay. He froze at a girl who looked dead. Her upper body was a writhing snake. It had to be a lamia, and lamias are terrifyingly strong. A poisoned Vespa hornet stinger plunged into the soft flesh inside her mouth. A cold truth slammed into him. That barrage of poison needles the guy hurled at the green tiger yesterday explained everything. Luck sided with him. He had no choice but to wrench the magic stone from the girl. Today he plunged headfirst into the suimongres. He spotted mushrooms and curiosity gnawed at him. Were they edible? In that hellscape, even harmless plants could be lethal, so he dared not step closer. He snatched a green rat, dubbed it the forest rat, and flung it into the mushrooms. The rat went utterly still. The hero's breath hitched. These were paralyzing spores, another cruel natural trap, and he snarled, "No one can live here." He bet everything on traps, the only way someone like him, without proper combat training, could take down monsters. He gritted his teeth and vowed he'd fight tooth and nail to survive. At last he slammed his shovel aside, the hole done, and buried the suman flower and the mushroom deep in the waiting earth. He stamped his feet and refused to budge, hunger devouring him. while the hero pinned his hopes on landing a colossal catch tomorrow. He snapped awake and barked, "It's time to see what's going on over there." He froze as a colossal boar loomed before him. Even asleep, he still couldn't fell the beast. The hero swore he'd finish him on the spot, but carving him to pieces devoured an entire day. A blue snake writhed in the monster's belly. The guy gaped, convinced he'd stumbled into a bizarre ecosystem. Night had already swallowed the sky as he scooped up the boar's fangs, its fur and meat, and a glowing magic stone. The hero realized he'd gone ages without real meat, and the first bite detonated on his tongue, pure, irresistible deliciousness. This state had blunted his axe and knife until they were nothing but useless blades. The bones looked rock solid, so he grabbed them and put them to work. It weighed a ton, but I hauled it with surprising ease. Right now he's crafting an axe. He'll pour molten resin into the clay mold he fashioned, and when it sets, it'll turn rock hard. He hammered an axe out of hardened tree resin and carved a sword from boar bone. Morning's already here, and he's so consumed by crafting tools that exhaustion can't touch him. He set his jaw and dove into building another trap, tearing through the work and finishing far faster than yesterday. He convinced himself his strength had skyrocketed, or he was just piling up experience, and blamed it all on the meat. Thank the gods he's like this now. Before, no matter how fiercely he pushed himself, he couldn't grow any stronger. His eyes snapped to a yawning cave mouth, darkness hungrily waiting inside. Spotting a wall torch burning, the hero assumed someone lived there and immediately blurted out an apology. He peered into the silence, sure the place was abandoned, but a threadbare blanket and a faded drawing whispered that someone had lived here before. He stumbled upon a diary, its pages crammed with entries about monsters, edible plants, and medicinal herbs. In those parts, this knowledge was the thin line between survival and certain doom. He froze, ruins riddled the demonic realm, but everything was vague, no specifics surfaced. Brute force and regular magic won't save us. Every 3 months a colossal monster rises, so we must master space-time magic. Modern spellbooks, common sense rules fail, and ancient magic circles utterly outclass our age. Unknown plunged into that place, and a raw regret burned in him. He couldn't unravel the mystery of those lands. The warehouse pulsed with strange, unfamiliar metals. Knives and armor looked forged by the stranger's own hands, so the hero figured he must be a seasoned adventurer. Curiosity scorched him to uncover the stranger's past, but some things will stay buried. Above all, he should be glad he'd found this shelter. The cave's interior lay pristine and undisturbed. It might be a relatively safe refuge. The main character clenched their jaw and swore they'd move there. He vowed to forge a house around the cave as his base, sculpting it over time into something beautiful as his long-held dream of a home began to come true. First he storms into that neglected room and strips it clean. Then he restores whatever can be salvaged and fashions the missing pieces from whatever materials are on hand. He insisted what he'd done would be enough. He carved out a new home for himself, nothing else. Not a single soul welcomed him. He absolutely thrives, basking in the freedom of being cut loose from messy human ties. The knight swore he'd kill him the moment a breach opened. The only thing missing was a wild bear. They froze, utterly helpless. One hissed that if they didn't get rid of him now, he'd burst out before the people. They had no other choice. The stranger stepped forward, eyes sharp, and asked, "Are you in trouble? Do you want me to help?" They pressed him for his name, were told the wild bear wasn't so strong in the devil's kingdom, and he asked to be allowed to fight him. Keep your eyes peeled for wide swings, sidestep the opponent's rock-hard skull, and strike every soft spot. The hero flashed a grin and snapped, "Are you from the training camp?" He claimed he lived just down the road, and asked if they had any wheat or vegetable seeds, and the guy said he'd swap them for monster meat or magic stones. The soldier declared he had some on the campgrounds. The hero snapped, "Let's go." If he gets the chance, he'll seize it and swap his materials for coal and paper. Triumph coursed through him. He'd claimed every single thing he'd wanted. He declared he was finally finding his footing in the demon realm. Vast, uncharted places still waited, and he had to draw a proper map. He had no idea why the soldiers looked so confused. The hero thought he'd become strong. Maybe it was only natural, forged by a life spent surrounded by fierce, unrelenting enemies. Hunting swallowed the boy whole. He'd gone unwashed for ages, and the soldier, perhaps embarrassed by the grime, assumed the boy reeked. The hero's eyes blazed as he declared that since vegetable seeds had appeared, it was time to take up farming. He spotted a gigantic turtle and exploded into action, chasing it off before it could trample his field. She hurled a swamp at him and he seethed. He'd just washed himself. Its leg trapped in the swamp, the turtle pitched forward. In his eyes, it had become nothing but a piece of meat. The The meat burst with flavor, but the soup steamrolled it. The stranger's notes pointed to that creature, the smoked turtle you can catch and make your pet. This fiend barely registers on the demonic realm's danger scale, a pitiful weakling. The protagonist decided it was time to push deeper into the lands, and today he set his sights on one prize, the sea. He'd cured so much meat their salt was nearly gone. He decided to press the soldiers for some. While mapping, the heroes climbed the hilltop, spotted the river, and could trace it downstream straight to the sea. He realized the demonic kingdom seemed to end there. With only the job of extracting salt from the seawater left, he suddenly spotted something strange on the shore. He found a girl collapsed on the ground, dropped to his knees, and pressed his ear to her mouth, hunting for even the faintest breath. His world tilted. She was a demon. As far as he knew, they'd been crushed by humans long ago and vanished without a trace. He swore he didn't need another problem. Her breath faltered like a dying candle, and he had nothing, no tools, no supplies to treat her. Reality slammed into him. This land belonged to him, and he refused to shoulder the blame for the demons that had breached its border. The hero decided to feign ignorance, pretend he hadn't seen a thing, and insist he was only there to make salt. A dinosaur thundered after him as he fled in a daze, utterly clueless about why he was even moving. He tested the leaves on a wood rat. The taste was gut-churning, but they'd flood him with raw strength. Certain he'd done everything he could, dusk was swallowing the sky, and hunger drove him to hunt for food. The hero thrust a morsel toward her, and she nodded, accepting it. He barked he had no clue where she came from, only that she was sitting in a demonic kingdom on his land, and commanded her to leave the moment she finished devouring the crab. She launched into a language he couldn't follow and stamped him with the name, Macho. He insisted it wasn't his name, but she kept calling him that until he finally gave in. The hero smirked, told her she could call him that, and asked her name. The girl answered, Till. She spun toward him and he blurted, Do you have enough food? Then cringed and apologized for not having any left. He barked, How did you get here? Then switched to picture communication, flipping through images until the answer came alive. He swallowed and admitted he understood almost nothing. Demons were clashing, and the girl had bolted. He leaned in, eyes bright, asked if she was curious about his work, then grinned and said he boiled seawater to harvest its salt. The girl unleashed a tidal wave of magic, an unstoppable surge of raw power. He told her to wait, then shot the question, Do you mean you'll tend the fire? He realized events were starting to twist into something wildly off-kilter. If she planned to stick around the demonic realm, she might as well strike a bold bargain, skip the rent, and have him teach her magic. He wound up clutching a mountain of salt. He seized on the idea that teaming up would be faster. He shook her awake and snapped that she had to follow him. The hero vowed she'd live under his roof until they built a boat to bring her back. She slapped him with a memory, the terrified kid he'd been the day he first set foot there. Her jaw dropped the moment she laid eyes on his house. He began to see that the thought that this house belonged to him. He flung open the oven where he bakes bread, shoved the trembling forest rat he'd been experimenting on into view, and snapped that she mustn't touch anything. She collapsed into sleep at his place. He figured exhaustion had finally caught up with her. He took her with him, convinced she'd be useful, but that choice could explode into a catastrophe. The moment someone discovers a demon's hiding there, they'll seize him and drag him off to jail, no questions asked. He still insists she leave. He revels in life within the demonic realm. The hero refused to wait for morning. He yanked her awake and, breathless, tried to explain everything. The boy replayed and sharpened the words he'd say the next time he saw her, and from that moment, the strange life of a man and a demon in the demonic realm kicked into motion. He sneered she was too weak and spat, How do you expect to survive in the devil's kingdom? He confessed he couldn't shield her every moment, and they were left helpless. Nothing could be done. The hero's eyes blazed as he urged, Let's start with training. He insisted she start by rounding up every forest rat she could catch. They dove into shooting practice, breath steady and aim razor-sharp. He snapped at her to stop launching those massive balls and to send smaller, sharper shots that slammed harder. He barked, Steady your aim, and demanded, Why are you closing your eyes? One mistake and she'd be finished, so he barked, Shoot. The girl nailed the target. He snapped at her to wipe that smug grin off her face. He couldn't say why, but it set his teeth on edge. She sagged, utterly spent after felling a single green monkey before sunset, and he was stuck babysitting her. The boy implored her to teach him magic. A ribbon of light poured from Till's hands, then snapped back into his palms as if summoned pure magic. A faint, prickling unease crawled up his spine. Stunned as a tidal surge of mana roared through him, he swore he'd unleash every spark instead of letting it go to waste. He demanded to know where the mana came from. The hero reckoned it awakened the day he moved in. He plunged into battle, certain magic would bail him out. He didn't give it a single thought. The hero cracked a grin and vowed to try his hand at household magic. He snapped into action, and the girl let out a shaky breath. After listening, the guy burst out, "Magic is an image. With it, you can conjure anything into existence." He gambled with the image, and a magical flow burst forth, but it was a tiny, feeble trickle, completely useless in battle. He roared that they had to try to kill as many monsters as possible. He unveiled their route for today. She taunted, "Afraid, ride the wind and fly up." He shot back, "Is magic hard to control? Then she'd have to climb up." She whirled to face him. He snapped, "Don't scream, this is part of the training too." A monstrous moth loomed there, and he dared her to try handling it on her own. A paralyzing poison slammed into Till, sealing his body in immobile ice. The boy blurted, "Are you okay?" clutching a magic stone carved like a massive moth in his hands. He decided to embed a magic stone into the cane and imbue it with a paralyzing curse. The idea paid off. She shot forward from that moment, growing and evolving at lightning speed. She unleashed a ruthless combo, paralyzing spells to lock them in place, then savage offensive magic to tear them apart. For the next few days, she tore through monsters, unleashing her paralyzing combo and dropping them one by one. Till morphed into someone sharper as she learned the Devil's Realm, and he beamed watching her snap into faster moves, yet he still couldn't pull off a quick spell. Shaping the image ate up too much time. He caught sight of a horde of demons. They outnumbered her, but she spun her cane into a blur, battering them relentlessly. Moments later, they barreled into an enemy far beyond their strength. Paralysis couldn't pin him down either. He knew the monster wouldn't let them get away that easily. He outmaneuvered everyone, always one step ahead. He blurted, "Is this your magic?" She shook her head. He was convinced he'd unleashed some kind of magic. A vivid image exploded into his mind. A mysterious board that haunted his recurring dreams of another world had taught him a cascade of strange, potent magical images. He flashed a grateful grin and asked, "How do I use this?" She walked him through it, explaining the steps. He snapped at her, "I don't understand anything." Today the boy hones his magic again, heart racing as he dares to imagine forging a true magic blade. A knife made of special tree resin won't cut it. He scavenged hellbug horns and monster claws, shoved them into every prototype, and every single one failed him. Like that time, he had to unleash something powerful enough. A chill shot through him. Why was she making noise? Demons couldn't use that technique. The hero cried out, "I might have just uncovered something incredible." He jabbed at the plate and demanded what lay on it. Raw meat and nuts stared back. The man snapped it wasn't a dish and vowed to cook it on the spot. The main character kneaded the dough into life, pulled a steaming golden loaf from the oven, and the girl devoured it, bliss flooding her face. He beamed that she loved it. With a mountain of map-making ahead, her hands were a lifeline, but he knew someday he'd have to send the girl back home. He demanded she fell the forest to stumps, vowed they'd build a boat, and said she could sail home whenever she wanted. He snapped they'd be wasting too much time like this, and with a normal weapon, he'd turn it into a magic sword. A lightning idea struck him, and he declared he'd be back soon. The hero snatched the stranger's weapon and charged it until wind magic roared through its steel. It was a terrible idea. The ball crackled with off-the-charts magic conductivity. The strangest things were deadly, so he shoved them aside for now. They felled enough timber for a boat. Planing the stubborn boards turned into pure, back-breaking work. He figured the wood was sodden, and with no other option left, he steeled himself to dry it out. He dove into training, flooding each part of his body with magic to test its limits. She stormed up to him, eyes blazing. "I'm going to kill those monsters," she declared, and he warned her to be careful. Evening had already fallen. When you're locked in, hours vanish like smoke. She kneaded and pulled a steaming loaf from the oven. Being able to eat or sleep whenever you want, that's a life to envy. He snapped his eyes open, barked, "What was that noise?" and a bone-deep cold slammed into the room. The monster snatched the girl and the boy. The hero vowed they'd escape the instant they plunged below. He snarled that the girl left him no choice. Our hero summoned a titanic fist of earth magic and slammed it down. The guy channels wind magic into his feet, cushioning the impact into a feather-soft landing. Till harnessed water magic and spun it into a snaring trap. She gulped down some water herself. He leapt in to help. The sun hung low as they stood stranded, out of supplies in a wasteland of jagged rocks and shifting sand. A sandstorm tore in, forcing them to hunker down and ride out the night. She burned with a high fever. He dismissed it as a cold, convinced there'd be no medicine there and frantically searching for a plan. Convinced the stranger's diary hid answers, the protagonist ripped it open. The demon masquerades as aged men, the women sport sharper, chiseled faces, the magic stone cures colds. He spotted demons squatting on the Trent, the river winding through swampland far to the north. He tore a wyvern's wing and stretched it into a rough canopy, then the hero urged the girl to hang on for a moment. He funneled magic into his legs and tore off with a plain, ordinary run. He tore through the shadows, racing to snatch the magic stone before time swallowed it. The monster lunged at him. He fought back with brutal precision, countering blow for blow and snapping, "I don't have time." He strode up and pressed a glowing magic stone into the girl's trembling palm. The unusual black aura radiated an icy chill. Till pulled through, and the guy whooped in raw relief. He snapped for her to stop clinging as her horns scraped across his wounds. Meanwhile, on the border of the Devil's Kingdom, a girl plunged into an unknown place, fierce curiosity pushing her forward. He declared he was working the fields today, pictured himself weaving a spell to conjure an irrigation system, and a girl strode up to him. She pressed, voice tight, "What do we do?" He answered coolly, "We wait and see." The knight slammed into the slime's churning core, slinging crackling magic as bait. Shock ripped through them when the strange monster erupted into view. The knight barked, "Why is this slime so strong?" The boy figured the fire was a cheap distraction, but it meant nothing. The blaze couldn't punch through the core. The knight staggered, drained to the bone, and half watched their magic flicker out. He strode forward, announced his name, claimed the land as his, and told everyone he had a few words to say. He blasted, "What are you doing?" And they shot back, "Who are you?" The man declared they were the adventurers, White Lightning, come to this land to hunt down mighty monsters, and the strangers snapped, "Don't worry, we'll exterminate every creature in that hole." The man shoved an adventurer card forward. The protagonist scoffed that he didn't care and warned, "This is private property, don't set foot here without permission." The adventurer slammed a hand down and snarled for him to bite back his curses. They were the strongest party in the city. He demanded to know why they had to die. The man barked, "Don't take another step or you'll be in trouble." The knight spotted the tiny dragon and exploded into a sprint. He skidded to a stop when he saw the priestess sprawled unconscious. Another brutal problem slammed into him. Poised to sell the stash he'd stockpiled at the training camp, he resolved to bring the girl along and beckoned till to walk beside him. The protagonist slammed a palm down and barked for her to shroud the demons, mask the horns, and veil the skin. He clenched his jaw, determined to funnel magic into his legs and surge forward. He shot the man a hard nod and spat that he'd come to trade. The stranger's face snapped into recognition, and he demanded who the girl at his side was. The hero grinned and shot back that Till was a little odd but a godsend. Now he could snag even more materials. He thrust a clutch of magic stones and materials at them, insisting he'd found the girl on the way. The man raved that the sword the main character forged himself was breathtaking. A blade made from green tiger bone is almost unheard of. The guy said he'd also tried to forge a staff from a magic stone. The man owned up to knowing little about it, but raved the materials were top-notch. The main character declared he wanted to buy sewing tools, woodworking tools, an iron sword, and some women's clothing. He vowed that if there was any chance, he'd snatch up the book of spells and space and time without hesitation. He shook his head, voice tight, "Not sure we have it, and if we do it'll cost a fortune," and the other man lunged forward asking, "Can we order it from the capital?" The merchant snarled you'd have to pay up front. Most of those books are fakes, so he insisted it'd be easier if he went himself. The main character vowed he'd try to find her himself. The man vowed he'd order the clothes and the other materials, then summoned the guy to return in a week. The next day he resolved to leave at once and hunt down the ruins named in the stranger's diary. He and the girl vowed to hunt down the treasure. The stranger left no trace of where the ruins he needed lay. He didn't even clutch a complete map of the demonic realm. To the west yawns the gateway to the demonic kingdom, to the east stretch the seas the girl sailed from, and to the north loom jagged mountains and impassable terrain. The guy slammed his fist on the map and barked, "We have to go south." They burst from the forest and slammed into a barren desert. The protagonist gaped, convinced he was mistaken. There was nothing there. A sandworm erupted from the dunes and attacked them, towering and terrifying, but the diary declared that despite its massive size it was surprisingly weak. The magic sword failed utterly. The protagonists cried out that they had to run. Ragged and gasping, Mukio and Till tore free from the sandworm's maw while the guy, stunned that PJ could call the beast a weakling, wonders who PJ even is, and after a short silence he flips open the diary to see if it describes a way to defeat it. They burst back into the cave as Macho dives into the diary, pouring over every faded line. After a while, the hero shouts he's found it. Realizing PJ's weapon isn't like his, the man conjured magic circles. He pieces together aloud that the diary hides different magic circles and vows to recreate them, then sketches a circle and steels himself to funnel his magic into it. Shock pins the heroes in place, and they erupt into screams as the explosion rips the air apart. Makio channels his power into another magic circle. The stone cleaves in two, jolting the boy. He leans in, studies the split, and blurts, "Does this inscription really slice through space?" Makio's memory snaps back to the man's belongings, and the hero's gaze sharpens. PJ has stitched tiny magic circles into everything, hiding them in plain sight. He reels, thinking again who the hell this man was. He's dead certain the man was a masterful magician. The hero's gut clenched. Why would this man choose to die here alone? He snapped, "I don't understand any of this," then, spotting the other's pensive face, unleashed a deafening V and demanded, "Is Mashio sad?" The hero stayed silent. At dawn they returned to the same spot. The hero slung PJ's sword over his shoulder and declared it a desert blade, but first they had to stock up on water. As the heroes near the river, a girl spots something, presses her hand to Makio's shoulder and cries out. He lets out a sharp cry and spins toward where she pointed. His breath catches when he spots the girl from yesterday, standing in the water. She locked her gaze on them like a predator. The hero, certain it was that priestess again, snapped, "What do you want?" The priestess declares she's abandoned the White Lightning, then drops her name, Jennifer Volkov, and asks if she can stay here. Makio flat-out rejects the offer. The girl's jaw drops in surprise, and the heroes slip back into their work. Jennifer barked that they'd need a healer the moment anyone got hurt or sick, and reminded them she runs the squad's consumables, so she's demanding to be allowed to stay. The hero snaps no again. He's already told her everything. The priestess pleads, refusing to stay in the camp. Mikio can't fathom why she needs this, and the guy groans out loud. He'd already guessed. He snaps to the conclusion that she didn't leave willingly but was kicked out. She reels, cheeks ablaze, stammering as she desperately insists it doesn't matter. He snaps, "That's not true. This land's mine. I'm not leaving her here until I know every last detail." And Jennifer freezes, clamping her lips shut. She trembles, tears blurring her vision, and with a voice that cracks she chokes out that her former comrades told her she's no longer needed, begging to be allowed to stay here. Makio snaps that he can't fathom why she needs this, and demands to know why she won't return to her homeland. The priest retorts that she's homeless, an orphan. The hero refuses to let her stay, declaring this place hell for people like her and urging her to find somewhere better. Jennifer snaps a proud denial, crowing that this land is exactly what she'd been hunting for, and the hero's jaw clenches as displeasure flares in his eyes. The priestess keeps insisting the place is empty. No one is here to betray her. The hero roars that he's here and this land is his. The girl isn't convinced. She jabs him and offers to take her to his camp. Mashio howls even louder. Could she really be deaf? He lays down the rule, stay, pay rent, and don't make a scene about anything you see in the Devil's Kingdom. She instantly agrees and says she has some money. They stumble back into camp. Makio pulls the newcomer aside and warns him to watch for monsters. The priestess starts singing cheerfully. A monster lunges. She crumples unconscious, and the hero lets out a long, exasperated sigh. He told her so. In the cave, he refuses to watch her die and become a monster, so he hides her here for now, swearing he'll send her back later. Then a sudden knock rattles the door. Jennifer screams, jabbing a trembling finger at the demon. She can't fathom why it's here. The hero realizes she swore she'd keep quiet. The demoness drowns the ringing with a savage roar and tells Makio about the bread. The priestess recoils, stumbling backward in horror. The hero shoves it down, bolts upright, and yells he's off to water the fields. The priestess, baffled, reaches for him and tries to call out, but her voice falters, so she turns to Till and asks, "Is his name Makio?" Jennifer bolts after him, disbelief burning. She still can't believe she saw a demon and snaps, "Aren't they dangerous?" Mashio can't feel the danger. She might be a little clueless, yet they click like old friends. The girl snaps that they're enemies, and if the guards find out, he'll be arrested. He spun, fury flaring, and barked. They were enemies more than 100 years ago. Then spat, "Is this what the church teaches? Persecute people who have done nothing." The priestess scoffs and scrambles for a counterbalance. The guy reveals Till taught him magic in exchange for rent, drenches the fields with water, and says it turned out pretty good. He snarled that if Jennifer couldn't pay the rent, he'd throw her out. She proudly brandished 10 gold coins and asked if that would cover a month, and the hero's jaw dropped before he blurted that it was enough. The girl presses a scrap of paper into his palm. Makio studies it and gasps, "A check." He says it's not gold, and the priestess beams, agreeing. The check is worth 10 gold coins. The hero snaps, "This won't do." Jennifer grins. What else could she expect from people in the wilderness or in the capital? This is normal practice. She snaps that they must take the check to an exchange office to swap the gold, and Makio shoots back that they're not in the capital. There are no exchange offices here. The priestess flared, fury bulging in her chest, as the girl shot back that she understood everything, asked if he really needed a worker, then vowed she could wash dishes, fetch firewood or a fire, and broke off mid-word. She curls into herself and hisses she'll stop at nothing, convinced she'll one day seize the highest office in this perfect country and rain revenge down on them. The hero gaped at her, utterly baffled. The other guy read it as a sudden burst of fury and an outburst about revenge. Then he scratched his head and blurted, "I knew it." He flung his arms wide and snarled, "Get out, you don't belong here." Jennifer's face goes blank. She can't follow him. Did he do something wrong? The hero confirms it, and it hits him why she was kicked out of the party. She never listens. He growls that she explodes when denied, and here your plans rarely survive. Life in the devil's kingdom is no bed of roses. The priestess TSKS trembles with shame, spins on her heel, and stalks away, puffing. She shoves her things into a pack and strides out of the cave as Till keeps munching his bread, and between bites, asks if she's leaving. He confirmed it, explained she came to take revenge, insisted there's no place for someone like her here, and told her to start everything anew in the capital. Dawn crashes in. The next day is here. Makio bellowed they'd press on through the desert today. Till sprang up, whooping with joy, and the hero cinched PJ's sword to his hip. A memory snaps back. He warns the desert steals your bearings, so he nabbed a creature to guide them on the way home. He lifts a reef bird, its instincts dragging it straight home. The girl bursts with joy, and over a deafening ring, cries that Makio has foreseen everything. The hero smiles back. He flexes his legs, whips around, and urges them to pick up the pace. Distracted, he flinches as Till suddenly yells his name, and he skids to an abrupt halt. He barked what else happened, and the demoness jabbed at the jagged rocks below. A girl lay crumpled among the stones. Jennifer lay unconscious, her body riddled with wounds. He drops to his knees and checks her leg. She's alive and breathing, but the bone is snapped. He releases a heavy, defeated sigh and says he'll have to leave the priestess for one more night until the deafening ringing finally fades. They lead the girl into a cave. Makio tells the demoness he mended her wounds with restoration magic. Sure, everything's fine. Till snaps, "I won't drag this search out any longer. We're heading to the desert as planned," and the girl nods in silence. They burst back toward the desert, and he's sure the priestess will abandon them the moment she realizes what's happened. A ripple in the sand catches his eye and Till sees it too. She calls out his name and points to a small raised mound. It's an earthworm wriggling there. A colossal worm roars toward the heroes. Makio rips his sword free, knowing he must take the worm down before he can roam the desert in peace. Now he depends on PJ's blade. He unleashed the weapon and cleaved the monster into dozens of ragged pieces in an instant. He grinned, disbelief and glee crashing through him at how the murder finished in a single heartbeat. Fear clamps down on Till as the ringing explodes in her ears, and she forces out, "It's cool." The hero zeroes in on the blade, a damn fine sword, and finally understands why PJ called those monsters weak. He rifled through the journal, declared the other desert monsters just as weak, found the criteria downright fascinating, then froze when he spotted a glaring problem. He gapes at the never-touch poisonous plants, sign, bewilderment roaring in his chest as he sweeps his gaze across the barren area. There isn't a single plant to be seen. Mashio calls for a deep dive into the research. The heroes pick their way across blistering sands, huddling behind jagged rocks as the storm lashes at them. A blinding glow rips across the sky and a strange object hangs in the air. One guy gapes, blurts, "What is that?" and then repeats the last word. His breath catches as an island hangs in the sky, shackled to a massive chain. The ruins from PJ's diary slam into him and he calls out, "We need to move faster." They stride up to the colossal chain together. Disbelief pins him to the spot. He slams his hand on the chain, jaw dropping at its gargantuan links. No clue what it's even made of. Mashio suggests they climb onto the island, and Till backs him in everything. They launch into the climb. The boy pants, cold dread slamming him as he realizes it's far tougher than he thought. Sweat beads down the hero's face. He swore his demonic realm training would be enough, but this fight is still crushing him. Then Till's scream rips the air as magic coils around the girl. Mashio whipped his head back and realized she'd tried to take the easy route with magic. Useless. He'd tried the same, and the chain's backlash slammed him. They used to cling to it with magic, but now it ravenously devours every spell. The hero watches his mana bleed away, curiosity flaring as he hunts the one who made it, now a mystery they have to crack. They surge upward, already miles from the shore, the island looming just ahead. He fights for air and rasps, almost there. She's spent, the ringing in her ears deafening, and she echoes his word, their hands already touch the ground. They claw up the island and collapse in a heap, gasping. Makio beams with overwhelming relief at finally arriving, until, breathless, admits the climb was brutal. The hero whips his head around, eyes ripping across the scene, convinced the sprawling shapes before him form a city. They sweep the island as he hunts for houses, furniture, any trace of civilization, only to find silence and empty shells, abandoned, not ruined. They fling open one of the houses, and Makio's heart drops. No bodies, no signs of a struggle. The whole island is deserted. He keeps muttering, they just vanished, till snaps a look at the hero. Then something nearby seizes their attention. The guy whispers, "Is that a grave?" and crouches to study the inscription. The stone declares in cold, carved letters, "Here lies Peter Jefferson." Disbelief rips out of him as he screams, "Is this really true?" Tilly tilts her head, eyes asking, and Makio's gut insists PJ is buried here. Yet if that is his grave, the question still gnaws. A single question hit them hard. Whose skeleton lay in that cave then? He lets out a low chuckle, admits he understands nothing, then says the sun's sinking and they'll have to spend the night here, and the mysteries only loom larger. They find a house and settle in for the night, but the hero can't sleep. Cold claws at him. He trembles, shocked by how thin the air is up here. His shivering wakes the girl and cheeks burning. He asks if he can cuddle up to her to get warm. She barreled into him grinning, her hug smothering the ringing as she declares, "These are hugs." He shouts, "I didn't mean that at all." The journey crashes to a close as the heroes swing the door open and usher the bird inside. It wheels once, locks onto the true course, and Makio roars, "That's it, it's over." The flying island offered nothing more, so they called off the search, raced back to the cave and bolted home. Till's hands drop from exhaustion. She screams, drowning the ringing, "It's so hard for me." The hero spits and sand rains over him. The guy grins and suggests they conjure magic to heat the bath. They tear into bread. The hero collapses onto the bed with a heavy sigh, and then something catches his eye. He explodes into a scream, shock ripping through him, as Jennifer lies on the bed, soiled and wounded. The hero explodes, bewilderment tearing his voice. "Why are you still here?" She drags herself upright. Makio leans in, studies her, spots the priestess's fingers snapped, and realizes she's burning with fever. The guy bellows, "Till." A demoness glides up to Jennifer, palms igniting with healing light that mends her wounds. The hero snaps the same question, "Why are you still here?" And the girl turns away, cheeks burning with embarrassment. She curls around her knees and says the moment she stepped into the forest she couldn't get out. Monsters and strangling plants attacked instantly, and she was lost in seconds. Was this the forest's baptism? Makio thinks it all quickly knocked her arrogance flat. He snapped the next question aloud. "Why didn't you use restoration magic? You're a priestess." And the girl admitted she'd cast it so many times her mana was completely drained. The hero exhales a heavy, weary sigh, admits he's utterly exhausted, and crashes straight into bed. He thrusts the job of watching the fire onto her. Jennifer, puzzled, says, "Are you talking to me?" And he shoots back, "Not hard, just work off the food you ate." The next morning explodes as the hero snaps awake, flinging his arms into a mighty stretch while a thunderous yawn rips free. His gaze snaps to the girl. The priestess sits opposite the fire, eyes locked on the flames. She hasn't blinked. The hero says, "She really has been watching that fire this whole time." Jennifer's cheeks flare as she confesses she came here absolutely helpless. She couldn't even get out of here, and the guy lets out a heavy sigh, scratches his head, then reaches for one of the staffs. He presses the paralyzing cane into her palm and promises it's hers. With it, she can stop the monsters in their tracks and reach the exit by the stream, and she reels, extends a trembling hand, then yanks it back. The priestess drops to her knees, swears she'll cover the lodging herself, and pleads with the hero to let her stay here for a while. A thunderbolt of shock slams into the hero, leaving them utterly blindsided. The girl keeps pleading, admitting she's not good enough, and suddenly the weight of her weakness slams into her. The priestess bows her head lower and warns that if she walks away without even trying, nothing will change. Makio fires the question back. Does she want to change? And what about her talk of revenge against her former comrades? Jennifer goes silent, turning those words over in her head. She leans in and confesses she became a priestess after her parents abandoned her. The church sisters smiled and gently pushed her out with a live freely. She heeded them, became an adventurer, and that life cast her out too. Jennifer spat that revenge was just a tidy excuse. The brutal truth was no one needed her, and she couldn't bring herself to admit that weakness. The hero stayed silent, taking it all in. He snaps, "Why do you have to stay?" She springs to her feet and shoots back that it's because they live here together, and the hero staggers. He never expected to hear that. The priestess keeps laughing and joyfully declaring they don't care if anyone needs them. They simply live free in these harsh lands. Her smile explodes into pure joy as she declares it unbelievably cool, and Makrio stands speechless, words choked back in his throat. She drops into another bow and implores him to teach her how to live a life of wild adventure, begging the hero to help her. He screams, baffled by her talk of adventures, and simply roams his lands, scouring every ridge and hollow. He spins away, reins in his breathing, steps back and says, "Do whatever you want, just don't drag me into it," and the girl snaps her head up, stunned. She beams again, relief pouring through her. Jennifer spins around, grinning, and eagerly asks Till to teach her to bake bread, while the demoness keeps shoving bread into her mouth, each crunch smothering the ringing as she asks again. Jennifer clutched her hands as a bewildered Till shouted for Mashio. The hero watched, sure the girls had found common ground in a heartbeat. The priestess wastes no time making herself at home. She spreads a blanket into the niche, and since he's agreed to let her stay a while, asks if she can use it as her bed, and the boy answers. Fear claws at him as he realizes he might end up living here alone. Where did he go wrong? Jennifer remembers she forgot something, plucks a coin out, and says the advance is modest, but at least it's something. Mashio inspects the advance and proclaims, eyes wide, that he's never seen a coin this old. She snaps that it belonged to a zombie woman, the only monster she could defeat. He suddenly understands everything, and the world between them shifts. Jennifer stayed with them for reasons he could never fathom. As evening fell, the hero whittled a plank smooth with nothing but a knife. The priestess snaps, "What are you doing?" And Makio grins, saying they're crafting a cane to sell at the training camp. It may not look like much, but it works fine, while the girl keeps rifling through the items. She explodes, screaming that everything is utterly wrong, and the hero reels, terrified by the sudden tidal wave of her emotions. Jennifer flips the cane in her hands and snaps, "Does this paralyze?" The man smirks and confirms, "Yeah, why do you care?" The priestess cuts in, cold and clear. "It's a top-tier debuff weapon, not some cheap toy." Sheepish grins spread across the heroes' faces as Makio scratches his head, stammers and blurts, "Is it true?" The heroes burst out of the cave. Jennifer beams, waves them off and calls, "Good luck." The boy and girl stand and watch in silence. Ears ringing like thunder, Till howls, "Will she stay with me?" Mashio snaps, "She will, she's not going anywhere." The demoness snarls, "Why?" And they bolt, and as they race the hero shouts that he doesn't know she doesn't want to leave. The girl beams that it's obvious, Till's finally getting a girlfriend. Makio falls silent, simmering with the uneasy sense these women are bossing him around as they draw up to a human settlement. The man crowed that he'd flipped the hero's cane for a fortune, grinning as he plotted how to squeeze even more out of it. The guy snaps, "Of course I can," and rips through his things, rifling madly as he says the hero hunted spellbooks, couldn't find the right tome, but he's got something. The man plants a pentagram-stamped book on the table and declares he has something. Mashio grabs it, reads the title, A Beginner's Guide, and dives into the tome. The hero realizes it lays out the rawest circle magic, scant, yet enough for him to finally hone the fundamentals. The man lays down a deal. He'll take her in trade for his wares. The hero nods goodbye, races out that day to buy boat-building tools and women's clothes, and spends the next day poring over the manual. Mokio figures the glowing magic circles on PJ's gear, let him wield fire, water, earth, and wind, but a deadly snag waits. It hits him most of them are useless, so he snatches a pen and jots them onto paper to save for later. The priest vanishes around the corner. She notices the hero devours books and asks if he never fights monsters. Makio snaps his head at her voice. He snaps that he must find a way to defeat them somehow. Each of them sets off on their own adventures. Jennifer fixes him with a wordless stare, turns away saying, "It is indeed so," and inches through the cave, glancing back over her shoulder. She spun back, cheeks burning. She'd forgotten to thank him for hunting down women's clothes for them. He listens like a statue, then, without so much as turning his head, shoots back, just a coincidence. Strange sounds ripple through the forest as an adventurer girl, hammer clutched, barrels into view. Till bolts toward the hero, shouting his name and waving at him with pure joy. She's drenched in blood, a paralyzing staff clenched in her hands. Makio snaps, "What happened? Why are you covered in blood?" She spits back that it's the blood of a smoked turtle, then scrabbles through her pockets, yanks out a stone and thrusts it at him, asking him to say what kind it is. The boy snaps it's no stone. A lightning pattern is etched across it, clearly man-made, but when he channels magic it stays dead. Mashio flips open the diary and studies it again. He uncovers something. The hero flips a page and reveals the same lightning-streaked drawing of the ruins. He presses till where she found it, and she answers, "In the lake." She jabs a finger at Jennifer, collapsed and gasping from exhaustion, and boasts she was the one who taught her to swim. Makio watches in silence. Makio warns ruins may lurk on the lake's floor, so they must explore it. The heroes rush to the right spot, and the hero steels himself for what awaits. He peels off his shirt, loosens up, shouts, "I'm off." charges his palm with bright light magic, then plunges into the water as the girls watch, the hero sinking deeper and deeper. Small fish swirl around him, then a titanic one rips through the shoal. Makyo locks onto it and unleashes magic instantly, convinced she should be the one to receive it. He rips a massive wound into the monster with a single strike, plunges deeper, judges the fight here impossible, conjures a roaring water current with magic, and dives down even farther. The hero conjures a rushing stream, spots something wrong, curses, and realizes the current he summoned has churned the silt into a blinding cloud that hides everything. He seizes the chance and conjures roaring torrents that scour the ruins clean of silt with a surge of magic. The guy bursts into view. Till fires how'd it go, and Makyo shoots back, there's nothing to see there now. He yanks on a t-shirt and keeps talking, saying he suspected ruins so he clawed through the muddy bottom. The hero decides to dive back in once the water clears. His gaze snaps to the shadows, someone is closing in on them. That's the girl with the hammer. Jennifer rockets to her feet and screams his name, and he stays silent at first. He steps forward with a sharp greeting and snarls what dragged her into the devil's kingdom. She begs forgiveness, stammers that she only heard people lived here, then freezes for a beat and bolts toward them. The hero groans. A water monster screams, lunging at the girl. She drops her weapon in terror as the heroes stand frozen, watching her struggle in silence. Till roars over the ringing, demanding if she's okay and needs help, while Makyo insists they wait a moment. He's sure it's a man and says it'll be easier to rescue him once he starts to drown. Only a trembling hand breaks the surface. He knows this is his chance, so he rockets forward and yanks the drowning man up by his clothes. Mashio hauls the stranger out. She hacks and spits water everywhere, and the guy's jaw drops when he realizes the person in front of him is a girl. He hauls her up onto the shore, snapping that if she's going to wander the devil's realm, she should have come prepared. It's no place for someone who can't even stomach mucus, and the girl, still hacking, chokes out a desperate apology. She says she caught wind they craft top-tier canes, so she tracked them down to buy them, and everyone leans in, hanging on her every word. Understanding slammed into Mashio, the canes are sold at the training camp, and a desperate stranger drops to her knees, pleading with him, voice raw as she begs him to sell her the canes she needs. He locks eyes with her in a charged silence, then agrees and shoots, "I don't need the money, what can you trade me for them?" The girl asked to look through her backpack, hoping they'd find something useful, and the guy eyed the contents with a slow, thoughtful stare. A weathered book snagged his gaze. He flipped through its pages and asked, "Is this a history book? That's the kind I'm after," and the stranger replied it should contain the history of these lands. She gasps as the book claims flying islands and monsters taller than mountains. She scoffs that the author has clearly embellished it. Makyo studies the pages carefully, doubting herself because it now feels most likely true. He bellows deal and pledges 10 canes in exchange for the history book. She stammers, "Did I hear that right, 10? Hope floods her voice. That would be amazing. He grins and vows to take the book and bring her 10 canes when she returns. Worry claws at her as she begs him to wait. It's too good an offer, and she doesn't know when she'll get another chance. Mashio nods, an idea flashing through his mind as he fixes her with a fierce, intense stare. He asks if she can keep a secret, warning that whatever she sees in the demonic realm must stay buried there. Without her silence, they can't strike a deal, and she replies she understands. Mashio slams the till open before her. The demoness stares at him, a question burning in her eyes. The girl trembles, frozen with fear. She gasps, "A demon." Till nods and she blurts, "Is that really a problem?" The hero cuts in, eyes burning, "So whatever she sees in the demonic realm stays here, is that true?" She falls silent for a heartbeat, then stammers that he's right. Everyone piles back into the cave, and the guy presses Jennifer to search for anything they can trade, snag any magic stones and wands. The girls spring into action, and Makyo freezes as it hits him. He never asked why the girl needed so many magical items. The stranger stammers on, voice cracking, explaining bandits have erupted to the west of here, and they need powerful weapons to crush them. He pauses, thoughtful, asks again if she mentioned the Civil War, then snaps that now's the perfect time to earn money. She freezes and screams in stunned disbelief, unable to fathom how that's possible. Realization slams into him. This reply doesn't sound like a merchant's. She gasps and stammers, choking out that it's true. Jennifer darts up to the hero, leans in close and whispers, "Let me distract you, just a few words." She leans closer, still whispering that the goods are too perfect. Only loot from a noble's carriage could be this fine, so she suggests robbing one. Makyo whispers, "Are you a thief?" The priestess boomed at the girl, admitting it might be true. An uneasy certainty prickled her. She'd seen this girl somewhere before. The hero roared that the stranger had turned to the bandits, then begged forgiveness. He flatly refused to deal with criminals, and the stranger froze, stunned. She screamed, "I'm not a thief," and the heroes froze, staring in stunned bewilderment. He demanded to know where she'd gotten that product. She fumbled, hunting for the right words. She stammered again, choking out that she was a noblewoman from Eastern Canir, sent by her uncle, the lord, to buy weapons. Now Jennifer's face snaps with recognition. She knows exactly where she saw her. Mashio stares, puzzled, and admits he didn't understand anything. The priestess proclaims Eastern Canir is the closest land to the Devil's Kingdom, and that everyone accepts the Devil's Realm as part of Eastern Canir. The hero falls silent, jaw clenched as her words spin through his head. He jabbed a finger at the adventurer and demanded again, "Did I hear you right? A civil war's erupted on your territory, and a nobleman's daughter came here to buy weapons." Then snapped, "You'd better run." The noblewoman's stutter flares again, then she bellows that for the inhabitants of Eastern Canir, flight is not an option. Jennifer backs her fiercely, declaring Eastern Canir presses up against elf lands. There's nowhere to run, and to the elves they're barbarians. Makyo understood. Wait, didn't her uncle let her go so she could flee? She snapped back, "No way, I'm the best female warrior in Eastern Canir." The hero's face cleared, and he said the only thing that mattered was that she hadn't stolen them. He jams the staffs into her arms and snaps that she must leave the forest and never tell a soul about this place. Burdened with her load, she trudges off as the heroes press forward to explore the lake. He swore he'd stumbled onto the hulking bones of a giant monster that day and found nothing else. The next morning the girls crash into the hero's place. Till's shout drowns the ringing as he asks Makio if they're going to explore the lake again, and the hero shuts it down. Nope, not today. He's decided to stay in and read. The book he ripped from the adventurer was a history tome, and inside he learned these lands once held a country. Then, abruptly and for reasons lost to time, people began vanishing en masse. Colossal monsters devoured the flying islands. A religion sprang up that treated deer as God's messengers. Relentless disasters pummeled the land, and the hero suggested this cave might be a refuge. He's drawn to Eastern Canir, the girl's homeland, and the book paints it as a lush, fertile realm that's constantly scorched by uprisings and war. Mashio's heart pounds as he realizes the civil war was set ablaze by adventurers, and in a book illustration, he beholds heroes who have wrested their lands back. He chews on it, blurts, "I don't like this," and a cold premonition slams into him. A storm is bearing down. The heroes burst back into the village on the edge of their lands, and the man snaps no at Makio, insisting that from where he stands, no one is sending them anywhere. The hero says a noble warrior woman stormed in yesterday, shouting that a rebellion had erupted in the neighboring territory. The warrior swears he heard it himself from passing adventurers, but those lands are too far away. He shrugs, tossing out that the rebellion's probably crushed and the hero can stop worrying. Makyo holds his gaze, utterly silent. Task done, the boy and girl sprint back as the hero admits, "That may be true, the man is right." The demoness broods in silence, then a bright idea sparks in her and she calls his name. A torrential downpour batters the demonic wastes, turning the cursed land into a roaring, sodden nightmare. The heroes scramble back to the cave over slick, treacherous rocks as Makio spits a curse and roars that the rainstorm is a savage, unstoppable beast. By the cave they spot a priestess hauling bulging sacks with something hidden inside, and Jennifer calls the hero's name while shouldering a heavy bag. The boy's eyes snap to the passage. She's already barricaded it with sandbags. She warns the cave's safe for now, but if the rain doesn't stop, their fields will be ruined. Makio's jaw drops. She's right. He has to see for himself. He bolts for the fields, only to watch a colossal torrent crash in and drown the crops. He watches the water climb and knows they'll be flooded if it keeps up, so he snaps into action and bends earth magic to carve a new channel and divert the surge. With that spell, he yanked the earth beneath his crops skyward, vaulted off the sudden rise, and shot into the air as the rain pounded on, refusing to stop. The boy staggers back into the cave. The priestess leans forward and asks how it went, and he breathes, "Not much, I saved the field, but everything else is underwater, so we can't expand the farm," and the girls gape in stunned silence. Makio snaps that, for now, they'll have to barter their goods for vegetables and wheat. He says the rain battered the world all day, and by morning it was pounding even harder. Till thundered back from reconnaissance, breathless, a hurricane had erupted. Trapped indoors, the hero vowed to cobble together a homemade trap using PJ's magic circle as his blueprint. He dives into the plan, narrating every move. First, he carves a magic circle into a plank of wood and deliberately leaves one stroke unfinished so it won't detonate on the spot. He envisions a towering monster swallowed by the blast, then plots to wedge this plank under the fallen leaves so the explosion rips the monster's legs clean off. A deafening crash makes him leap to his feet. Makio whirls and snaps. What the hell was that? As girls surge to the entrance and Jennifer yells for him to come over. A colossal, pitch-black mountain loomed beyond the trees. The guy stares bewildered and blurts, "Where did this mountain come from?" The girls gape in shock. Jennifer calls his name till starts that this mountain, and the hero snaps, it moves. Lightning hammered the ground, wind spiraled around the unknown object, the hurricane tore trees from their roots, and the bolt swelled into an enormous, searing blaze. Mashio shouts that howling winds and jagged lightning lash the mountain, and the monsters, unable to stand it, scatter in terror and race even farther away. The hero's memory snaps to PJ's notebook. He reels, eyes wide, and shouts, "Is this really the colossal monster that shows up every 3 months?" He roars he's a walking disaster, disbelief ripping through him that nobody ever noticed. A massive bear's body rockets at the heroes. Stunned, they barely leap back. A guy groans as other monster corpses crash to the ground around them. On the other side, Makyo spots a crocodile and a snake set ablaze by a lightning strike, and the guy says the tornado hoisted the monsters into the air before lightning hammered them. The hero scours the cave and spots a section already caved in. If they linger, the earth will swallow them, and he watches the demons bolt north. He roared at Till and Jennifer to gear up. They're coming north with him. Wind screamed around the monster as he hoisted his legs even higher. The hero screams at Till to enchant her legs for blinding speed. He slings Jennifer onto his back, orders her to bind herself with a rope. She begs forgiveness, and he bellows for everyone to step forward. The heroes sprint from the oncoming hurricane as the land shatters and trees are wrenched from their roots. Monsters keep toppling, the ground rips open, and the heroes vault across jagged rocks. Makyo wonders how they can still push north as the rain hammers down. At last, the guy bellows that they've reached the wasteland. Silence slams down as he stares in stunned disbelief at the picture in front of him, his breath turning ragged and heavy. Smoke still billows from the monsters as lightning rakes them, and Makio feels like the world is ending. The hero snaps that the wasteland's useless and urges heading back to the forest. Everyone's lungs burn, and Makio realizes they just need to find shelter. The planks exploded beneath his feet, hurling him and the girl on his shoulders into the yawning void as he spat, "What happened?" And they plummeted faster, screams ripping from their throats. They finally touch down, and he cries out, clutching his side as pain rips through him. He snaps his head up and sweeps his gaze around, thinking it's an old well or the crumbling ruins left by people who lived here long ago. Then Mihio tries to stand up and winces as a sharp pain cuts through him. He winces at his ankle, convinced it's broken. Jennifer starts untying herself and snaps a sharp warning about it. Mashio slumps against the wall, grateful the shelter keeps the rain and wind at bay, till peers down from above and cries the hero's name. He yells back that they're alive, and the demoness beams with joy. She plunges down the slope, snatching heavy branches and hauling them back to feed the fire. She snaps them together and proclaims the sky's biddish 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 has fallen silent. Flames leap up, and everyone sinks down to sit around the fire. A sound snaps behind him, and he realizes even here the monster's footsteps still thunder. The priestess bows slightly, pleading she thought she was going to die and begging forgiveness for holding them back. The guy says it's okay, no one expected it to be her, and his voice cracks. Fate's destiny bends as the girls shout his name. Sunlight slashes through as water drums everywhere. Someone calls Makio and asks him to wake up. He only hears the full phrase the second time. The hero rips his eyes open through the haze as Till snaps his name, anger flaring even hotter. Mashio jolts awake and blurts, "How long was I asleep?" Then freezes, eyes snapping to his leg. "Is my leg okay?" The priestess answers, "I cast a healing spell on it." She jabbed a finger into the darkness and called everyone there. The hero shot to his feet with a shocked scream, grabbed the torch, and shoulder to shoulder with the priestess, tore after the demoness. He whips his head around, heart racing. An old well, or is water secretly snaking through the ground here? In the cave they stumble on glowing mushrooms. He and Till scream in awe, shouting how beautiful it is, while Mashio scans the walls, asks, "What kind of glowing mushroom is this?" and warns, "Don't touch it." They stumble onto an underground lake, the hero's sight swallowed by the dark. Till slips something into his hand, calls his name and snaps, "This is that thing." His breath catches as recognition hits. "It's that same stone with the pattern." Makio snaps, "Where did you find it?" And the girl blurts, "The skeletons got it." Deep in the cave, a cloaked skeleton slumps. The guy asks, "Is this another corpse?" Till insists he be examined. Maybe he left something behind. The heroes uncover another book. Makio snatches it to inspect, and the priestess says it's the guide fledgling adventurers read, but the cover is cracked and the pages are brittle with age. They flip open the book and find the stone. Beneath its image, a carved warning bellows, "Never lose the key to the dungeon." And Mashio leans in, heart pounding, asking again, "Is this really the key to the dungeon?" Till demanded what kind of dungeon it was. The man admitted he'd never set foot inside, and Jennifer snapped that she'd been in the capital group and they'd been headed straight for the deepest part. He devours the guide and announces a final warning tucked at the very end. If the monster steals the dungeon, everything will be over. All eyes snap to her, puzzled. Mashio fires off, "How can someone steal a dungeon?" The priestess chews it over until goes cold and silent. The demoness howls, "Impossible." The hero snaps, "Get out now," and he freezes as the giant monster's thunderous footsteps vanish into silence. Mashio heaved himself free from the well, looped a rope down, the girls scrambled up, and the guy exhaled, relieved the sky had cleared and the giant monster had vanished. Fallen trees choked the clearing. The hero barked, "It's a wreck, I hope the terrain hasn't changed much," then ordered everyone to go home as lifeless monster corpses lay strewn between the trunks. Till calls out the guy's name and declares they're starving. Jennifer sheepishly backs her up. Makio's convinced they really haven't eaten since yesterday. Now a problem looms. He gags at the idea of eating the corpses, snatches fruit and pleads with the girls to eat that instead. Till and Jennifer agree, and the three of them head back to their cave together. Mashio bellows a full-blown pogrom is ripping through down there. He warns the girls the room's packed with stones and rubble, and the sight slams into him, flooding him with exhaustion. The demoness tore into the stores, checked the sacks, and declared the wheat bone-dry. The priestess proposed they restore order so it could be lived in again. Night falls, the hero crumples from exhaustion and gasps they've finally found a place to sleep. Tilt slams into the bed beside him and is out like a light, and Jennifer pleads for forgiveness. She's about to pass out too. Makio tucks a blanket around himself, aching to wash up but knowing sleep will claim him too. His eyelids slide shut and his thoughts flicker out. A sudden jolt rips him awake. He shoots upright, bewildered, feeling something squirm in his pocket. He pulls out a coin that keeps rattling. Sudden clarity, this is the coin Jennifer gave him, the one she claims she pulled from the zombie. He blurts, "It's pulsing like a heart." The coin drums in his palm, then bolts from his hand as Mashio gasps. The coin skitters along the ground as the hero rockets after it, shouting he can't lose it, lunges to snatch it, and the coin suddenly rockets upward out of reach. He lunges at her again and again, screaming her name, guttural groans tearing out of him as he spits furious curses. The hero bolts after it, shouting if it's rolled too far as the coin skids toward the water, and the guy reels back, shouting there's a swamp. He spits a curse and lunges for it again, but the coin rockets from his palm and plunges into the water as Makio lets out a soundless scream. He shoves his hands into the water, snarling, "Are you making fun of me?" Then his fingers close on a coin, and a figure explodes up from the surface. A translucent elf explodes out of the water, cutting the surface like living glass. Makio gapes again in stunned disbelief. The elf falls silent, utters one chilling word, then turns and strides across the water like it's stone before vanishing, while the hero keeps screaming in mute terror. The next day he exploded into his story. He'd seen a translucent elf ghost hovering there, and the girls sat in stunned silence. Till bursts into laughter, jabs a finger at the hero and asks again, was there really a ghost? Was Makia scared? Jennifer watches on, silent and unreadable. He roars at the demoness to stop laughing. She just cackles and taunts. How can anyone be afraid of a translucent silhouette? The priestess locks eyes with him and demands if he wronged her in life. He swallows, forces a small smile and says, "I don't think so." Jennifer grins and says everything's fine, just sprinkle her with holy water. The hero reels, eyes wide, stammers, "You can make holy water." She lifts her chin, declares she's a priestess, intones the spell and blesses the water. She goes translucent as Jennifer asks, "Is my amount enough?" And Mashio beams it is, marveling that her prayers and gestures are exquisitely priestly, because she truly is a priestess. A triumphant laugh tears from him as he declares he'll plunge the coin into the holy water. Then he drops it without hesitation while the girls watch, transfixed. They spent the rest of the day restoring the cave, hauling out rubble, scrubbing grime from the walls, and washing every corner until it gleamed. Mashio gapes at the ruined food supplies, every last one destroyed. The priestess's voice slices through the air, calling his name. She flings open a room piled with the previous owner's belongings, and the hero's jaw drops. PJ's equipment sits perfectly intact, not a single scratch. Jennifer blurts adamantite. The guy asks again, and she snaps. It's an almost indestructible metal, so prized that even close friends will brawl over a weapon made from it. Mashio took in PJ's lonely place and knew he had no friends. Then a voice ripped through the silence, calling his name, Till. She reveals the toppled pentagram. The hero gasps as the drawing suddenly flares with an eerie light. He froze in horror, convinced the giant monster had smashed it. Battered and barely whole, it was humming, teetering on activation. He ushers the girls out, snapping that the room's too dangerous to use for now. They all let out heavy sighs as night creeps in, and something is happening tonight. The coin rattled in the jar as Makio gasped. It's moving again, the holy water didn't help them, and it kept pounding against the glass. The boy blurts, is the elf spirit calling her. Panic spikes. Imagining this every night, he hurls another curse. Makio snatched the can and demanded she calm down at once, but she kept hammering at the cork while the guy crept up to the swamp beside her, torn about whether to go any further. He realizes he's gone so far he could lose his way home, and when Mashio stomps through a carpet of leaves, a muffled, desperate moo answers from beneath them. Startled, the hero stares down at something strange beneath his boots, zeroing his gaze on the foliage as he hunts the mystery with cautious, burning curiosity. He took a cautious step back, unsure if what he saw was real or an optical illusion, hesitating as he strained to catch every rustle and grappled with the strange spike of anxiety while his mind coiled, ready for anything. Moments later, he stomps on the leaf pile again to test his suspicions and fears. The leaves answer with a sharp rustle and a faint shift under his foot, and he nods to himself, confirming what he'd feared. Mashio, now fully convinced someone's hiding in the nearby foliage, drops to one knee to get a closer look and deliberately sweeps the leaves aside with his hand. At first he freezes, speech ripped away, eyes nailed to a single point as his face twists with shock, panic, and confusion, while thoughts ricochet about what he's about to witness. Something crashes through the underbrush. An elf with long ears in light garb, mystic runes etched on her hands, lies collapsed and utterly motionless, a lost soul swallowed by the forest. He shot to his feet the moment he saw her, the elf from yesterday who'd snagged his attention, and his features snapped into cold, razor-sharp focus. Mashio's mind reels. The elf who once looked like a ghost now stirs with fragile life, and a cold suspicion claws at him, zombie or something like that. A frail, nearly lifeless girl claws out a plea for help, stumbling as her strength drains, gasping that she's alive and needs support, barely clinging to consciousness while her voice quivers with exhaustion. His gaze snaps to the water bottle in his hand. The coin inside has stilled, and he feels its calm is both strange and crucial to him. He scoops her up, lifts her close so she can drink, and presses the bottle to her lips while his hands and eyes scan her for any sign something's wrong. The elf opens her mouth, clutching the bottle in her hands, and gulps so ravenously water streams down her face, every drop laying bare her raw, desperate thirst. She forces herself to her feet, her short hair falling over her eyes. Wary and withdrawn, she barely squeezes out a shaky "thank you." He zeroed in on her towering height, couldn't ignore how she rose above the crowd, and his interest ignited. He burned to know where she came from, while the elf pulled back, watching him with wary eyes and withholding the rest for now. Water cascades down her skin as she answers that she hails from the elven lands beyond the mountains, her voice low but honed like steel. Mashio pins her with a careful gaze and asks if this country lies beyond the snowy mountains, then shoots the next question straight at her. What's your name? She names herself Helgen Toulon, Heli for short, and spits it out in slow, halting bursts, as if each syllable is dragged from deep inside her. Makio stands opposite Heli, announces he's the owner of these lands, catches the heavy exhaustion on her face, and urges her to go to the lands. She drops to her knees, bows her head a hair, and chokes out that she couldn't move. The earth had seemed to open and swallow her. She declared she'd been searching for help for her spiritual body and called herself lucky when she crossed paths with the landowner, exhausted, yet a stubborn smile still tugged at her lips. The truth hits him. This is spiritual magic, not a ghost, and his doubts evaporate until only cold conviction remains. Mashio crouches, eyes locked on her, asks if she can stand, and waits for a yes with his hand already poised to catch her. He scoops Heli into his arms, steadies her so she won't fall, presses her hand onto his shoulder, and they stride off together. He zeroes in on the cut on her shoulder and calls it out. She freezes, gaping at the wound like she hadn't even realized it. They leaned in, fingers tracing the ragged cuts on her shoulder. Deep gashes stared back, and the hero's concern snapped into a fierce, silent alarm. He spots a strange mark, a blade's faint groove. He clamps his lips shut and stays silent for now, but the sight ignites a burning curiosity. Makio freezes, jaw slack and eyes wide, surprise blazing across his face. He never expected to find those marks on the girl's shoulder. He pins Heli with a hard look, suspicion igniting that she's a runaway slave, then asks her point blank and studies her face for the slightest tell. Heli spat, "I'm not a slave," declaring she fled to escape state slavery, determination burning in her voice. She hurls the question back at him, "Am I a criminal?" and he pins her with a hard stare, calculating every twitch for danger. She says no, she only wanted to end a senseless war, and every word drips with raw, aching sincerity. The hero declares it treason, condemns her as a slave criminal, and his conviction is stone cold. He won't budge. Hilly explodes, "I'm no traitor," insisting they persecuted her and forced her to flee her country. She drops to her knees, pleading she won't cause trouble and begging the protagonist to let her stay on his territory, just for a little while. He freezes, words ripped from his throat, as a grave expression settles over him and doubt gnaws at his core. He paces, pulse racing, wondering if she can scrape together the rent to keep living there. This question tears at him, and he's bracing for an honest answer. Black Maw gapes ahead, utterly devoid of light and radiating a cold, unnerving hush. The two girls lock wary eyes on the exit, silent with breath held as they watch every shadow. Hallie erupts into the room, grin blazing as she introduces herself and gushes about how thrilled she is to meet them. The girls size her up as narcissistic, their reactions unreadable. He scratches his head as a cluster of outcasts converges nearby. He can't fathom why this place pulls them in, while the girls zero in on Helly, scanning her appearance and every little movement. He let out a heavy sigh, scowling at the thought that this new neighbor would unleash a tidal wave of problems, and a faint weariness tugged at him. A sudden cold thought slammed into him. He had no clue what this strange, eccentric elf would unleash, or how many disasters she'd drag him into in the days ahead. A plate twisted into an impossible shape sat before him like a silent dare. He stared at the meager plate and, voice steady, insisted that though it was modest it would at least fill him enough to keep his strength through these hard times. You could tell he was forcing a brave cheer. The girl with the little horns snapped that the wheat was already gone, no more cakes, and the hero's face went hard as he mapped the fallout, mind already racing. Makio realized with sickening clarity that everything was falling apart. A colossal magical monster had just appeared, ravaging their supplies, and the floodwaters had washed away nearly everything. The girls fired off a plan to head to the training camp and swap resources and supplies. Hilly hovered at the edge, eyes narrowing as she calculated exactly how much this move could tip the odds in their favor. After devouring the flatbread, they stared at their ruined gear, nearly all food and weapons unusable, and realized they'd have to stock up on everything to survive further campaigns. She snatched up the leftover supplies and set to carving a staff, the simplest thing to make, tucking in slain monsters' hides and the potion ingredients she'd scavenged. Mashio perched by the fire, wrestling with the proposed plan, then leaned in and asked the girl, voice tight, did she know anything about pharmaceuticals and could she brew healing potions, hoping it would ease their situation. She hesitated, then confessed she only knew the basics of pharmaceuticals and had no real expertise to craft anything that could be sold for a profit. Both heroes sealed a pact to throw themselves into potion craft, zeroing in on forging elven healing drafts, coveted cures that would fetch the necessary resources. The elf stared at a nearby stone until a sudden call yanked her from her reverie and snapped her senses back to the world. Mashio seized on an idea, reproduced the healing potions Helly had crafted, convinced they'd prove invaluable and spark trade with the other villagers. Cunning flared in the elf's eyes as she laughed and shut them tight. Her grin screamed she loved the idea and would throw herself into making it perfect for the whole company. Healy snapped up the proposal, shrugged that it was child's play, and volunteered to pay her keep in potions. Everyone agreed it was a fair compromise. She shot for the cave's mouth, jabbed a finger at the tree line, and vowed to hunt down the needed ingredients, while her companions only warned her to be careful. The forest swarmed with danger. The whole company froze like statues. The girls kept chewing calmly, and he could only think that everything was unfolding exactly as he'd predicted. A brutal gauntlet of trials awaited them. He loomed over the elf, collapsed on the ground, strange, choking noises bubbling from her as scorpions skittered across her body, and with a weary sigh he muttered, "She always gives me trouble." Shock slammed into Healy, freezing him as he stared at the hero, and the scorpion curled in the hero's palm, words gone. The protagonist stayed eerily calm, held the creature up, and asked if both of them were alive, desperate for any sign. Silence hit. The hero stopped pestering for an answer, spun to Till and barked, "Want to come grab magic stones to forge a staff?" He agreed, hoisting the staff in a single, decisive motion. They shoved Jennifer out to scour the cave's perimeter for edible plants and raw materials to replenish the team's dwindling supplies and harvest ingredients for potions and food, every find a lifeline for their survival. Helly sat in the cave, calmer now, and plunged into brewing potions from the gathered plants. This vital work pulled a fragile thread of order and control back into the chaos. The hero springs into action, tearing through the work with fierce, unrelenting focus. Syl and the main character slipped into the forest, eyes slicing through the gloom as he realized that since the giant magical monster appeared, dangerous creatures had thinned out, and that truth slammed into him. Time bled away, night pounced, and the forest was swallowed by a suffocating cloak of darkness. They dumped the stones, plants, animals, and threads they'd collected during the day across the cave floor, each piece primed to be forged into the tools and potions that would keep them alive. Jennifer roared with joy at the rich haul, slapping her hands together and firing up the team with fierce encouragement that steeled them to keep fighting. Her gaze locked on the arachnid thread. She inspected it, then proclaimed it a prime bargaining chip that would fetch valuable resources and lucrative deals, sending the company's morale soaring. Hallie demonstrated her medicinal potions, thrusting a cloth-capped, thread-wrapped vessel forward as she asked to keep the herbs for evaluation and further use. He warned the elf flat out, "Don't pay and I'll throw you out. Pay up and you can stay as long as you want." His words hit her hard, and the weight of responsibility dropped onto her shoulders. After those words, the hero blasted off for the training camp, then snapped orders to 2 girls to watch the house in his absence, keep intruders out and everything safe. The girls pressed luck into his palms, hugged him warmly as they said goodbye, and begged for his swift return, because each of them felt how vital the task ahead was. He ran through a mental shopping list, extra vegetables, fresh fruit, and construction tools he'd ask for to fix up his place and brace for the future. Far off, the resource exchange camp loomed, wooden houses, watchtowers, and a bridge locked into a fortified ring, daring any threat to test its defenses. Backpack slung over his shoulder and stuffed with the goods for exchange, Mashio's skin prickled as the air twisted into a menacing hush. Something deadly lurked around the corner. He and the hooded girl stared at wooden spears jutting from the earth, a brutal warning or makeshift defense that snapped them instantly to attention. The fights erupted inside a ring of soldiers, their ranks forming a crude arena. One fighter squared off with a man in light clothing who flashed with blinding speed and feline agility. He lunged at the soldier, his left-hand dagger a blur that sliced through the air far faster than the soldier's heavy sword, its lightness and agility giving it the edge. The adventurer hunched forward, pulse thudding, desperate to tell if this was mere training and whether the blur before him was a child or a grown woman. Every strike landed like lightning, razor precise. The captain strode up and greeted the hero with a warm, welcoming smile. He'd heard the hero had returned to camp and made plain his friendliness and readiness to cooperate. The company crowded the captain and demanded to know what sparked the uproar. Everyone needed the facts and to understand why alarm had flared. Steel-clad, arms crossed like a fortress, the captain boomed that this was an exercise to steady the people gripped by fear and anxiety after the recent events. He beckoned the protagonist over to the radio, hungry to hear his take on the latest developments at the front. War talk clawed at Mashio's nerves. He refused to join the conversation and instead offered to trade goods, since food had all but vanished after the disaster. The captain sealed the exchange with a knowing nod, igniting a calculated alliance between them that would bolster both and fortify their positions. Inside the building, the hero tore through the wares, his gaze locking on a shimmering spool of arachnid thread up for trade for food, and the saw, hammer, and needles the team desperately needed. He leveled a grim stare and revealed he held vital secrets of the demonic realm, secrets the hero would find invaluable, heralding dark events on the horizon. The captain's words slammed into him, sparking cold anxiety and mistrust, as he realized the conversation had shifted into a grave, consequential tone. The officer pressed, "Do you remember the civil war raging through eastern Kenya?" A bolt of realization hit the adventurer. The noblewoman warrior had barreled into the magic zone to seize a staff. The map unfurled to reveal the kingdom of Estynia. The warriors' lands lay in eastern Kenya, and the elves plunged into the civil war between nobles and adventurers. He demanded answers about why the elves invaded, desperate to pry open their motives, and how they tied into the war. He needed to know what exactly drove the elven forces to step into these lands. He heard a grim possibility. The elves' invasion aimed to wrest back their ancestors' lands. Even though the world had changed, ancient grudges and blood-bound ties were fanning the flames of war. The protagonist's mind snapped to Haley, the woman they'd pulled from the foliage, determined to stop the war between elves and humans. She fought for peace even as the conflict spiraled. When he pointed out others already lived here, the captain snapped that the elves had long been driven from these lands. The past couldn't be changed, the fight for control still raged, and this was just another ruthless front in the conflict. The adventurers outmatched the nobles in the battles with the elves, stripping them of their old status and influence, and flipping the territory's balance of power, forever reshaping what came next. Mashio was stunned. He'd never imagined this could happen, but the captain insisted this land breathed war and that the fiercest would snatch the people's loyalty in an instant. From the story, the hero realized these lands are now controlled by adventurers who wield real power and steer every event, their rise tipping the balance and sealing the region's fate. The captain barked the truth. A scheming nobleman is pulling their strings, whipping the adventurers into action to exploit this conflict for his own gain. The nobleman's image radiated a choking darkness as he boomed that the demonic realm was his, and the officer suspected he'd uncovered the staff's power and would stop at nothing to seize it. The hero and the girl scowled at the news, alarm and bitter unease flaring in them. It offered no comfort and left them both deeply worried. His hand dove into the bag and came up with a single battered scrap of paper, the only proof this land was rightfully his. The captain slammed the agency-issued document before the protagonist and snarled that, without a royal signature, it carried no legal weight. He could lose the case in an instant. After those words struck him, shock ripped through the hero. Tears streaked down his face as he couldn't believe what was happening, his mind spiraling into complete confusion. The demon realm had long brooded as a gray buffer between nations, insanely convenient but a blazing political powder keg, and even the captain wanted it handed over to adventurers. Mashio demanded the captain's backing, but wringing a firm yes from him proved impossible. The captain still hesitated. He dipped his head and dropped the truth. The royal army could only move if the Eastern army turned on the royal family, and that Eastern force belonged to the kingdom of Estynia. Sitting opposite, the protagonist watched the army unravel from within, internal rifts and bitter infighting, crippling any chance of coordinated action. A chilling reminder hits him. Someone has their eye on his land, forcing him to snap to attention, guard up, and ready to defend every inch of his property. Mashio flashed a razor grin and declared anyone who set foot on his turf without permission would be driven off on the spot. No chance. The captain warned those actions would spark a wider conflict and urged them to press the center for official land titles to secure legal protection. The three of them burst from headquarters toward the exit. Machio had his backpack slung back on, and an officer walked beside them, eyes sweeping the surroundings. The guards had already slammed the dagger-wielding girl into the dirt. She lay there, powerless, unable to resist. He shot a glance over his left shoulder and offered to take the girl with him, a grateful promise to soften the fate that awaited her. She sagged from exhaustion, her clothes torn and sweat streaming down her forehead. She couldn't stay on her feet, so the guards hauled her along by the arms. Dispatched by the new ruler of the Eastern Empire, she's bait. If he pulls her under his wing, he can erase her whenever he chooses. The captain leaned toward the protagonist's ear and whispered that keeping a woman in the camp was a powder keg, bound to invite all sorts of trouble. Mashio blurted that she might be a former noble, sent by the ruler, and ready to ignite a feud in his house, and the thought hit him so hard his pride crumpled. They snarled that she'd been reduced to a mere woman, her noble status ripped away, stay in the demonic realm, and the world would forget where she came from. The protagonist leaned in, eyes aflame, watching the girl slump helpless in the guard's grip while she stared at the floor, too tired to lift her eyes. Strength flared inside her. She slowly lifted her head, grabbing at scattered thoughts and forcing her gaze to pierce the chaos around her. At first neither recognized the other, then realization slammed into them. She was the same girl who'd come for the staff, her hair chopped short, and her connection to the demonic realm let her lock onto him. Till cut through their argument, snapping the main character's name into the tense silence. Her words landed like a gavel, flipping the conversation and snapping every head toward her. She declared the demonic realm was crumbling and promised there'd be work for every pair of hands. Her voice stayed calm, brimming with iron confidence, and her words struck like a rallying cry for unity in action. The short-haired girl locked eyes with Till and began piecing together why she hid her true nature, curiosity and wariness crackling in her gaze. She didn't even get a word out before the hero snatched her by the nape, yanking her under his control with iron determination and raw strength. The air between them crackled with tension. He scooped her onto his back and roared that they were taking her, while Till had already slung the backpack of supplies over his shoulders. They tore onward, smothering every clue so no one would suspect and refusing to be chased. From afar the captain called goodbye. The cave swung into view, and as they returned from their journey Jennifer and Haley rushed forward, worry etched on their faces and joy exploding from their smiles. The elf jabbed a finger and demanded to know who the girl was. She lay draped over the protagonist's back, limp and utterly spent. Drained, she slumped into Machio's arms. He, calm as a mountain, declared she was now under his protection and that he'd taken her in. She peeled her head a fraction off Machio's shoulder, forcing her racing thoughts to settle as she hunted for her bearings. Her gaze locked on a single point as she hauled her scattered thoughts into focus, hunting for what would come next. She locked eyes with Till while the elf herself, utterly baffled, gaped at the unfolding scene, stunned and wide-eyed. The girl locked eyes with her, then suddenly screamed her name, the shout slamming into her and making her jolt back. The fight exploded, the girl slammed the elf down, and Healy wrenched her hand from the throat with one arm while blocking the blow with the other. She strained to make sense of it, but the protagonist recoiled at the chaos. He lunged in, shoved them apart, clamped his palms over their faces to stop the brawl, and barked that fighting between servants was unacceptable. Both girls bristled at those words, letting their fists fall as confusion hit, and they scrambled to understand what they'd just done. They screamed as one, "We're still not anyone's servants," so thunderously the main character slammed his hands over his ears to shut out the roar. The captain's words snapped him to attention, flooding him with anxiety and prickling distrust as the conversation hardened into a grave, urgent tone. "I'll infuse the text with vivid, razor-sharp details so the atmosphere punches you in the chest, and keep the story crystal clear and logically tight." The adventurer slammed his fist and warned every resident. Anyone who causes trouble or refuses to pay for lodging will be thrown out on the spot. Until then, live together peacefully and keep strict order. The girls kept clashing, trading sharp words and bitter arguments, while Makio and Till, ignoring the charged tension, rolled up their sleeves and hammered together a new house, a home for them all. The next day he shot up before sunrise, greeted every resident in the house first thing, then scanned the room like a detective, reading every look and movement to figure out how to heal the team's rifts starting now. He spotted Sylvia and Healy lined up, raining stern scolds down on Jennifer as she tended the cooking fire. Both girls chorused, "Hotter meant better," and Jennifer froze, despair squeezing her chest. She didn't know how to please them. He froze, jaw hanging, amazed that those two friends and rivals had so quickly reconciled and now stood united in the same view. All the heroes converged under the forest canopy, ready to hunt for food and vital materials. Makio slung on his backpack, checked his gear with razor focus, and steeled himself for the hike. All the girls fling their hands up, a fierce, unanimous signal. They're ready to set off together. After a while they ran into a troll. Till and Makio's hung back, watching as Sylvia, hammer clenched, charged the hulking monster alone. Their clash ripped the earth apart, hurling chunks of ground into the air. His eyes locked on Sylvia as she carved through the battle, every strike thunderous, every movement a blur of lithe, lethal agility. He snapped back around, eyes slicing the dark as if something else might step out of the shadows. The giant turtle snatched Helgen off the ground, jolting her into shock. Her cloak snagged so she barely felt the lift, and she screamed for help, certain it would eat her. She didn't register the turtle, tens of times her size, bearing down on her, while Till and Mashio saw the looming danger plain as day and braced themselves. Crouched on the ground, the protagonist, and Till scanned the scene as Makio bellowed the girl's name, jolting Till into motion. He lunged at the turtle and hurled an incantation no human tongue could speak. The creature went rigid, frozen as if turned to stone. The protagonist sprinted after her, snatched the sword, and with one thunderous strike severed the turtle's head. Heli dove down as blood gushed from the severed head like a crimson fountain. Blood soaked Sylvia from head to toe, not a single clean inch left. When the head thudded to the ground, Healy hit the floor, pain ripping through him. Sylvia stood frozen, drenched in blood and stunned, and the hero lunged forward, blurting a frantic apology to her. He asked Till to take her to the river, scrub her clean, and hunt down fresh clothes. Till agreed without hesitation. Hala jabbed at her blood-stained clothes, pleading for someone to help clean them, and the hero met her with kind, encouraging words. With the girls gone, Mashio decided to whip up turtle meat soup. A cauldron roared on the fire, fragrant broth simmering, and the instant he lifted a spoon to taste it, someone shouted his name. A horned girl materialized and, silent as a shadow, revealed to him exactly what had happened. She darted forward to show the dead horse nearby, lying on its side and still saddled, its belly slashed open, and everything around drenched in blood. The adventurer closed in, and the sight slammed into him. It was the corpse of a horse. The saddle screamed someone had ridden it, and Jennifer called out that 2 more corpses were visible nearby. Mashio's eyes snagged on a discarded bag cradling a blood-streaked sword, and he knew invaders had struck. He plunged his hand into his bag, drew out the letter, read it, and sank into a stunned stupor. Above their heads loomed a monstrous hive of wasps, a buzzing black mountain that dwarfed them many times over. Adrenaline surged as the hero realized it was a seething nest of wasps. Mashio stared at the dead horse and the writhing swarm of wasps, and the awful truth slammed into him. The riders had been ripped to pieces. He shouted, "What do we do now?" When helping proved hopeless, someone snapped that they should just leave and grab a bite. Shock cracked across the elf's face as the proposal slammed into them. Mashio leaned in and saw her skin was a map of ink. his gaze lingering on the tattoos that wound across her shoulders and down her legs. She confessed they weren't tattoos at all but seals, cages for a savage curse that all but shuts down her magic. She lowered her gaze and confessed, voice cracking, that it tore her apart. Now magic was gone. Just then, other girls who'd heard the elf charged over, curiosity blazing in their eyes, and Jennifer recoiled as they closed in, panic coiling in her chest. They vowed that if the curse kept its distance from her life, there'd be no trouble, and Mashio, the landowner, beamed at the potions she brewed to sell. They all scoffed that her curse intimidated no one. One was a demon, the other hardly used magic. Sylvia grinned and unleashed a spell that numbed pain and flooded her muscles with power for a brief surge, and the hero watched it all with a smile. Convinced they were carefree, cheerful girls, he crushed the letter into a tight ball. The letters slammed to the ground, and in the corner stark, black letters declared their eviction from the territory. Heli eased Mashio awake with a feather-light touch on his shoulder, so the others slept on, convinced the moment to act had arrived and determined not to let this chance slip away, her eyes gleaming with excitement. He woke, prying one eye open slowly as he groped to understand what was happening and why he'd been yanked from sleep so early. Sleep still clung to him, but awareness crept back and the air crackled with tension. He shot to his feet, terror ripping through him at the elf's sudden arrival. The girls dove in at his side, steadying him with quick, sure hands as the air crackled with anxiety and electric anticipation. Her eyes lit as she said Till had shown her palm juice, perfect for potion vessels, and she couldn't believe no one had told her sooner. Makio, rubbing his eyes from fatigue, shot back that in this blistering heat you should fashion vessels from clay. Clay locks in coolness and keeps water tasting fresh far longer. The elf nodded, slipped away without a sound, promising she'd try other ways to craft the vessels. Fierce resolve lit her face, ready to experiment and bursting to help. Mashio planted himself at the threshold, stunned she'd woken him so early for that question. He hadn't realized it mattered so much to her, and confusion edged with irritation flickered in his eyes. The elf's breath caught. She instantly realized it wasn't over. With Till, she spotted something strange by the western stream that jolted the hero with alarm, and she warned it was dangerous and demanded the whole team's attention. They glimpsed a shambling, living-dead man winding through the trees. The sight slammed into them, terrifying and inexplicable, and the girls knew bone deep it was a harbinger of trouble. Makio and the girls tore into the forest to verify the tip, and before long they collided with Till. She thrust a finger into the thicket, worry burning in her eyes as she watched for their reaction. The disfigured body, deprived of part of its human features, inched across the ground, producing strangled, muffled noises instead of speech, and the sight slammed cold fear into anyone who saw it. It turned away from the heroes, exposing grisly details, half its torso torn away, and the sight slammed into them, cranking their fear into outright terror. Cold, brutal thought slammed into the hero. Even if the corpse harmed no one, burning him was the only choice. An abandoned body could spread infection, and safety came first. Jennifer leaned over the body, snagged by a strange detail. Her eyes narrowed as she hunted for what made this creature stand out, and memories and panic surged through her. As the body crept forward, Jennifer's memory snapped into place. She'd already defeated this dead man once, the only opponent she'd ever beaten in these lands, and that realization filled her with iron confidence and fierce determination. At first, Makio couldn't place him, until Jennifer said she'd once slipped that man a gold coin in advance. Makio's jaw dropped as the memory slammed into him out of nowhere. No one wanted the zombie virus loose, so the hero snapped at Till to torch the corpse, a brutal, necessary move to snuff out an epidemic, decided and done in a heartbeat. The elf demanded to know what kind of coin the dead man clutched, and the hero blinked. He couldn't identify the odd gold coin found with Heli's body, a single clue that yanked the mystery wider, and screamed for answers. The elf roared at him, insisting he should have warned everyone about this, fury at the missing information and dread of the consequences boiling in her stern, demanding voice. They'd guessed it was an elven adventurer, but the transformation mangled the body beyond recognition, its pointed ears swallowed by a tangle of wounds and ragged scars. Or maybe a comrade had come to these parts hunting a mysterious city, his fate unknown. Dread gnawed at the team as everyone spun grim possibilities. They brought out a jar with a coin suspended in liquid. She plucked it free, scrutinized every mark, and ached to learn its origin. She flipped the coin, its odd grooves and heavy weight screaming it was genuine. Everyone assumed this proved the zombie had actually managed to reach Midgard, and that discovery could upend everything. They discovered Midgard was the city at the heart of every legend and myth. This revelation ignited their investigation, because Midgard itself held the key to the solution. In the city of Yggdrasil Midgard, legends claim even children and elders bent magic to their will, and powered by mighty artifacts, the city surged far ahead of the other nations of its age. The kingdom struck deals with the elven country, keeping cultural and economic ties alive, and the team raced to pin down when the city's records vanished, sharpening their grasp of history. Sylvia snapped that she'd also unearthed this in a dusty history book. These parts had once been a full-fledged state. Her words hammered home how vital their findings were, and a fierce confidence ignited in their mission. Healy seized Sylvia's shoulders and demanded, "Where's the book now?" His voice cracked with impatience and a hungry hope for discovery. That book could unravel so many mysteries. The protagonist announced he'd bought the book from a short-haired girl and asked everyone to wait, recognizing the source's value and vowing to study it with the team, a crucial step forward in their search. He snapped open a tattered book and read that these parts once held a nation whose people vanished all at once. A titanic monster swallowed the island, and a different religion took root. The protagonist devoured the book's main text. The elf snatched it, flipped to the last page, and froze when their eyes landed on the diary's initials and the rune's description. The hero shouted that he'd found a diary clutched in the hands of the man he was holding. The lifeless body had lain in the cave, so long it was reduced to nothing but bones. With the horned girl at his side, the hero tracked down the island where Peter Jefferson's grave lay. Till was too busy gorging himself to join the exchange, while the other girls hunched forward, hanging on every word as they tried to piece the connection together. A jolt of confusion ripped through the elf. If Peter Jefferson was buried on the island, who was clutching the diary? She watched the conversation unfold, that question gnawing at her until doubt and panic surged. At first he agreed, then he leaned in and spotted inscriptions on the diary, and beside the magic circle that demanded to be studied. Suddenly, the whole mystery snapped into a new light. He fixed his gaze on the diary's final page he'd shown, and on the scrawl beside the magic circle, two starkly different clues that screamed importance, both brimming with vital information. The moment Helly noticed, she gasped. The diary was written by two different hands. The contradictions snapped into place, and the revelation plunged the whole story into a darker, tangled mystery. It wasn't news to him anymore, so he planted himself and tore into his meal. Certain the odds pointed to a shared hand behind the texts, yet even together they couldn't pry open these lands' secret. The riddle stayed stubbornly unsolved. When the forest corpse was tallied, the count shot up to 3 and the mystery tightened. 3 unknown figures chained to the land's hidden secret. Helly tore through the clues and announced this land once housed the kingdom of Yggdrasil. In elven realms, she said, deer act as the gods' messengers, a legend woven into their culture. Until the land of demons, deer are branded the devil's messengers, she said without even chewing, and that stark reversal ignited the clash between worlds and tangled our understanding. He realized Yggdrasil was locked in a bitter feud with the demon kingdom across the sea. That truth snapped into place every mystery and bloody conflict in history, and he stared, jaw clenched, wrestling with its weight. Helly was hit by 2 burning questions. Where was Midgard, and why had Yggdrasil fallen? They gnawed at her until she steeled herself to hunt down the answers. Haunted by those questions, Helly told Muccio she wouldn't leave this place until she unearthed the land's secret. Her fierce resolve ignited the others, and the team discovered a powerful new purpose for their journey. Jennifer and Sylvia rallied behind those goals. One of them proclaimed the book had been passed down through generations, and they wondered if destiny had chosen them to solve the mystery. That belief welded their efforts into one. Blindsided by the upheaval, he snarled that any ruins unearthed would be on his land, and vowed to expel anyone who tried to seize the treasures. He planted his feet and refused to back down. The mystery gripped the land and stayed unsolved, yet life thundered on. No one lifted the veil, but every soul knew the hour would come. Daily routines and shadowed secrets walked side by side. Helly until twalled fitting mismatched bricks, each a different color and composition, into a stove shaped like a guard's helmet, and shoulder to shoulder they painstakingly forged it into a rock-solid structure that became the proud symbol of their work. Jennifer snatched a broom and swept the camp clean, then wove baskets. Those tiny chores kept the place tidy and cozy, every detail vital to daily life. Sylvia clutched a massive bone, her mind igniting with fresh ideas and possibilities as she fixed on the future and mapped out her next moves. Sylvia urged Mascio to forge armor and weapons from monster materials, a daring, uncharted path for her, and she declared she wanted to grow and hone her skills. She'd never done this before, but she plunged in with fierce determination. Her infectious zeal lit a fire in everyone as she hungrily learned and welcomed every risk. Mascio grinned, dumped a mountain of materials in front of her, and told her to try succeed, and she could pay her apartment with the earnings. They sealed that pact and had each other's backs. After some time, Sylvia stepped forward and unveiled her work to everyone, a gleaming new suit of armor fitted with bracers and knee pads. She stood beaming with fierce pride and steady confidence as the protagonist praised her hard-won success. Since then, Sylvia rose to become the land's weaponsmith, forging sharp skill and earning hard-won respect, reshaping her place in the group and filling her with roaring pride. She implored the adventurer to teach her how to fight. Her new, burning ambition was simple: to become stronger and forge unshakable confidence. He admitted he wasn't strong enough to teach anyone, so he vowed to organize training and wilderness survival skills, a practical, useful alternative, and threw his full support behind the plan. She agreed and begged him to teach her more, and together they plunged into the forest, hungry for new trials as a new chapter of their journey ignited. Deep in the forest, a hulking, enraged bear reared up, poised to strike. Tension crackled, and they had to spring into action. Sylvia lunged and weaved, desperate for a decisive strike, but every hammer blow missed its mark. The bear didn't even flinch, and the fight became a brutal, exhausting grind. He watched from the sidelines, spotted untapped potential in the girl, and urged her to hunt for gaps in the enemy's defense, offering his battle-hardened experience to sharpen her skills. He snapped that when ordinary strikes hit a wall, you must flip your battle tactics. He'd noticed Sylvia hadn't drilled those moves, yet she still stormed to victory without betraying a single weakness. Heeding the advice, Sylvia grilled the hero about where he'd learned to fight. She needed to trace his path and tactics because it was crucial for her training. He bragged he'd ripped through basic training and signed on with a guild, then went lone wolf, honing his skills until his experience was razor-sharp and multifaceted. Those words branded him a fearsome fighter. His steady confidence sparked something in Sylvia, and her hunger to learn burned fiercer than ever. The hero studied the enemy like a surgeon, his hard-won experience already tracing the next move. His strategy was unblinking focus and ruthless analysis. He slammed down the bone example, proving that if you can read which way the bones bend, you can slip out of range, and even while cutting up an opponent, you can learn a lot about them. Concrete, practical advice. Leaving this place, the hero strode off and pounded the point that by watching your opponent you can craft your own way to fight, pushing for an individual approach that served as a lesson for Sylvia. She repeated the rule like a stubborn chant, but it hadn't clicked. Her training had only just begun, and only time and relentless practice would forge it into instinct. The adventurer pressed a strange fruit to his palm to see if it would sting with poison, staging a live danger test that proved tiny details decide who survives. Jennifer bit the fruit and her mouth burst into flames, a brutal reminder of the consequences of thoughtless actions that forced her to learn the lesson the hard way. He snarled at her not to gulp everything down. It only drags them into trouble. He shepherded the team, guiding every move and watching over them like a guardian. Their lives demanded razor-sharp caution. Life in the wild became a daily crucible of trials and lessons, each dawn hurling fresh challenges, and side by side they were forged stronger as they learned. One day during lunch in the cave, a sudden incident erupted and baffled everyone, snapping tension through the air and sending the whole group on edge. A cry tore out of the western river, and Healy zeroed in on its source, an ominous warning that slammed the team into action. The protagonist grabbed Till and sprinted out to scout the scene, ordering the other girls to stay put in the cave as they split the responsibilities. Every second mattered. They sprinted toward the river, braced for the unexpected, their feet hammered with unshakable resolve. Everything teetered on the brink of change. By the river they came upon two figures in black robes, faces wrapped in shadow, and one lifted a hand stamped with an unreadable sigil that screamed of mystery and danger. At that instant, a brand new story ignited. Mashio combed the area with razor focus, taking in every scrap of detail. Then his eyes snagged on motionless figures in the distance, and he called it out. Those frozen poses screamed a warning. Till crouched close to the bodies, checked their condition and found no breathing. Her voice went heavy as she reported they were all dead, without a single sign of life. She stared at the body, cataloging every wound, then reached out, fingers trembling as if to pull the truth of the death from its silent skin, while questions about what had happened to these people spun in her head. Till's gaze snagged on a strange mark on one corpse. Makio leaned in and realized the same tattoo marked every body, one brutal signature that tied them together. She said they're most likely targeting the wild lands, then stood and stared into the distance, wrestling to grasp the disaster's full scale. The hero suspected the chaos was an enemy invasion. Till agreed and urged them to scour the wreckage for survivors, and they clung to a thin, stubborn hope. They found several more bodies. Grief slammed into them, wiping away any hope of salvation and laying bare the full, terrible scale of the tragedy. Mashio whirled and snapped they couldn't leave the bodies lying there. Till urged hauling them before the captain to secure his backing. None of them could face this alone. First they zeroed in on Jennifer, grilling her about anyone in the group who knew what went down. desperate to piece the truth together and summon help from outside. Horror pinned the girls to the spot, numb and wide-eyed, while Jennifer's gaze snagged a familiar tattoo on one corpse, a clue that might finally point to where these criminals came from. She pressed her hand to her chin and declared the mark belonged to the killers from the church organization. Panic and suspicion ripped through the room, and everyone suddenly knew who had been behind these actions. They traded questioning looks, stamped with Cassie's expression 16, baffled by what that name concealed and straining to pry the threat's meaning loose. While they debated those mysterious figures, Macchio plunged deeper into thought, hunting who was really behind the crimes as his mind churned with wild guesses and shaky assumptions, and the whole case blurred into confusion. She stared into Mikio's eyes and poured out the whole truth in merciless detail, hammering home how grave it was and forcing him to stop and truly think. Macchio reeled as everything spiraled beyond his grasp, a swarm of unanswered questions buzzing in his skull. The character slammed the question at Macchio. Why did the killers have to come here? What was their goal and motivation? That question was the key to cracking everything wide open. Macchio whirled to her, eyes twitching with worry and shock as he realized the situation ran far deeper, and dread tightened like a vice in his chest. He eyed his companions. Realization hit like a punch. This story teemed with suspicious people, turning the task into a deadlier, harder gamble with unknown threats lurking everywhere. He made the call to hand the matter to the army. They couldn't face that threat alone, and the choice was calculated and painfully precise. The hero declared his plan. He'd march straight to the captain at the military camp, urging the girls to lie low in the forest, well out of reach, so they could summon help and secure support. The captain's jaw dropped, shock ripping through him as he began thinking out loud, muttering and pacing, frantically trying to piece the story together, every twitch and silence announcing how grave the situation was. Macchio spilled every sight and discovery in vivid detail, tension humming between them as they drilled into possible solutions. The captain stated his opinion. The young man snapped back, refusing to agree and launching into an argument, fiercely defending his stance and offering bold alternatives until a crackling, no-holds-barred debate ignited between them. They locked eyes and sparred with words, each hellbent on proving they were right. Every next move and the whole strategy hinged on their choice. The man leaned in and fired. "Do you have more time before that crucial conversation?" The question snapped the air taut and the clock pressed down. Choices had to be made now. Fear slammed into Macchio as he stared at the commander, eyes fixed and unblinking from tension. Pressure squeezed his chest and anxiety screamed through him. This moment was critical for him. The commander declared the conversation would focus on ownership of the wild lands, a matter beyond our usual military issues, but one that was crucial. The hero erupted, disbelief tearing through him. He couldn't believe his ears. It had to be a mistake, a misunderstanding, the news so wild it felt unreal. They vowed that in 3 days the papers would be in hand, locking down the young man's legal claim to the wild lands. Macchio exploded with joy and thanked the commander from the depths of his heart. This support was a huge boost and a crucial step forward for him, and his happiness was utterly real. The man grinned and announced he would soon be a nobleman, news that rocked the young man to his core, because his status was about to change. He gaped at him, disbelief and surprise blazing in his eyes. He couldn't fathom the change. Everything felt too good to be true. The knight crossed his arms and nodded, grave and unyielding, sealing his agreement and ordering the conversation kept secret for now. They would have to tread carefully. Macchio stared at the commander, bewilderment etched on his face as he fought to comprehend what he'd heard and the consequences. Everything suddenly felt tangled, complicated, and utterly unexpected. The commander warned that in 3 days the noble's private army would return to the wilds. Massive forces were about to sweep in, and the whole situation could flip overnight. Cold sweat drenched the young man as he blurted, "Why is this happening?" It felt impossible, and terror ripped through him. He declared, voice like iron, that the territory wasn't officially registered, and the army couldn't lift a finger, not even if invaders poured through its gates. Macchio knew this was the perfect moment to invade, and terror slammed into him. Danger was real and breathing down his neck. The commander braced with steel in his eyes and an ironclad plan, ready to unleash ruthless measures. Their mission was clear: defend the lands at any cost. The young man bristled at the sudden news, snapping that you don't toss out announcements like that. This demanded a far more careful, cautious approach. With a single sharp wave, the hero signaled he was counting on the boy, his trust ironclad, and the young man shouldering a mountain of expectations. Macchio's gaze pinned them as he demanded the army's size, probing their resources and capabilities. That number mattered. He paused, then finally said, "About 2,000 people." The number slammed into the character, leaving them stunned by its sheer scale. The captain growled that they were outmatched. They were only 5. Their numbers were pitifully small beside the army, turning the fight into a desperate, dangerous gamble. He crossed his hands beneath his chin and warned that without action a full-scale war would erupt. The moment demanded decisive measures. There was no retreat. Makyo clamped his lips shut and sank into thought. Then a bolt of clarity struck. He didn't care about becoming a noble. His only mission was to preserve the wild lands. He burned with visions of vast, untamed lands he ached to claim and protect. That hunger was his true drive, and every other thought melted away. He roared he understood it all and vowed to do whatever it took to finish the task, his resolve ironclad and unshakable. Mashio's calm voice cut through the room as he announced the Eastern genius was coming for them. He stood rock-steady, radiating cold confidence, no fear, making the danger unmistakably serious. The girls hung on his every word and instantly grasped the truth. The enemy would litter the battlefield with traps, and with so few opponents their whole playbook was deception, camouflaged ambushes ready to spring. One of the girls saw the situation clearly and felt a fire ignite inside her, turning the challenges into a chance to prove herself and steel up for the serious battle ahead. She panted, admitting this was her one shot to strike back at her enemies in battle, convinced she'd prove her strength and deliver justice in the fight ahead. The rest of the team froze, faces tight with confusion. Everyone felt the crushing weight of the situation, but nobody knew which move to make. They instantly plunged into digging deep pits and setting brutal traps to fortify their defense, each seizing a tool with fierce dedication, knowing their safety depended on every swing. Shovels slammed into the hard earth as the boys ripped out deep, careful pits, moving in tight, electric sync and refusing to stop until they'd dug enough traps. A jolt of realization hit her. She noted to herself that they were reverting to primitive methods, digging pits like in ancient times, and wonder surged through her at how those old tactics could still be relevant today. Mashio caught her thoughtful pause and leaned in, asking if she had any other ideas to shore up the defense. She hoped for a bold, unconventional plan that would strengthen their position. She scanned the options for a tense beat, hunting something unusual, then locked her focus and strained to forge an original defense that could turn the tide, her mind pounding. Till roared to unleash original magic, her spirits high and voice blazing with confidence. She swore it would be their secret weapon against the enemy, and her words ignited fierce courage in everyone. Everyone realized they couldn't wield that magic. Disappointment stung, but their spirits stayed unbroken, so they vowed to find help in allies, since that power felt distant and impossible. Till flung her hands skyward, urging Mashio to cast his spell. She prayed he'd unleash his power to bolster their defense, her voice ringing with fierce, expectant hope. Makiasai sharpened his focus and coiled his arms, nodding to unleash his magic. He felt the weight of the moment and steeled himself to give everything, eyes blazing with determination. A colossal boulder blasted out of the ground, stunning everyone with its sheer size as the team gaped in disbelief, and that spectacular burst of magic reignited the defenders' courage. One of the girls gasped, "I've never seen anything like that," her voice trembling with shock and admiration as she watched the unbelievable display of power. They declared they'd never faced anything like this, labeled it earth magic, and certain it sprang from nature itself. Their confidence in their own resources swelled. Makyo demystified the magic, laid out how it worked step by step to prove it wasn't hard, bolstering the team's courage and banishing their fears with a calm, unshakable voice. One of the girls snapped, cutting him off to insist he was wrong and that she knew more, her fierce confidence aimed squarely at the others and tightening the air between them. The crowd hung on the magic, every eye fixed, and Mashio's worry ignited, pressure and anticipation coiled in his gut. Calm slipped away, but he forced himself to hold fast as sweat beaded on his palms. The elf gaped and blurted, "You made that magic all by yourself." She admitted she never expected him to be that capable. Her shock melted into admiration, and Mashio's confidence surged. Till leaned in and revealed that magic itself can probe whether a spell can be cast, then tore the mechanics apart step by step, until everyone's understanding snapped into place. Magic bristled and recoiled at her words, outright rejecting her explanations, a silent duel of raw power and ancient knowledge that revealed the tangled complexity of the magical world. She grinned and explained she usually trains magicians in spells and arcane formulas, and he only has to test whether he can put that knowledge to work, the old-school creed of teaching magic. Magic sneered he couldn't do it, that he'd been labeled talentless. Those words slammed into Makyo, confirming every gnawing doubt and obstacle. Till proclaimed he could summon magic from his imagination, staring at it with fierce faith and wonder, and she insisted it was a singular gift that shattered every rule. The girls jabbed and pointed, laughing as they dubbed him weird, all playful teasing. Makio shrugged and grinned, knowing his weirdness was his strength. The elf owned being an oddball, insisted it didn't matter for their cause, and made clear the only thing that counted was his help and his willingness to fight alongside them. She dared him to conjure a labyrinth, a complex magical maze meant to baffle their enemies, a bold gambit that could massively fortify their defenses. The hero tore the proposal apart in his mind, gauging the brutal work it would demand and whether it would actually pay off, then raced through a step-by-step blueprint, picturing how he'd wrench the idea into the real world. She threw her weight behind the plan, declaring it perfect for keeping the cave safe, and the group erupted with fresh hope and ironclad confidence. They routed the trail to the cave through a gauntlet of hills and obstacles, weaponizing the land to bog down any attacker and seize a decisive tactical edge. She declared the high ground would let them seize control of the battlefield and spot advancing enemies long before they closed in. It was the linchpin of their strategy. Makia beamed at her answer, hailed it a perfect plan, and his approval ignited fierce determination in the others. They skirted close combat, siphoning every ounce of energy to stack the odds of survival, a cold, calculated choice. One of the girls blurted, "Can we unleash monsters on the battlefield to boost our strength?" The question ripped through the team, proving they were hunting every possible way to protect themselves. Makio jabbed a finger and snapped that the monsters could be mobilized swiftly and efficiently, and his words sparked fresh hope they could finally reinforce the defenses. Thiel snapped that magic circles could be conjured as extra reinforcements and shields, cracking open bold new tactical possibilities. Her memory snapped to the book's diagrams of several magic circles they could try, and a fierce thrill ignited inside her. Machio mulled the idea, declared it battle-ready, and his backing lit a wildfire of confidence through the team. The ally demanded, "We obliterate the enemy's supply lines to cripple their forces and seize a long-term advantage." Machio's eyes flashed as he urged slipping poison into the enemy's food, crippling them from within so they never had to clash, a ruthless, brilliant gambit. The elf mulled it, then snapped. Yes, poisoning was an effective, sensible tactic, and instantly the team's plan gained a lethal new layer. She revealed palm sap could be molded into pots that melted at the first lick of flame, instantly turning them into improvised weapons and widening their tactical options. Machio chuckled ominously, declaring they had plenty of ideas to prepare now, his laugh brimming with iron resolve and a mischievous spark. He seized the belief that if they pushed themselves to the limit they could win, and that certainty erupted into ironclad confidence and a stubborn, burning hope. He roared a battle cry and ordered everyone to ready for combat, igniting operations. Everyone knew the outcome rested on their shoulders. Mystery burned in the hero's gaze as his eyes swept the horizon, straining to pierce whatever lay beyond sight, concentration etched deep across his face. The girls nearby locked their eyes on the horizon, sharp and wary, feeling in their bones that the largest operation the wilds had seen in many years was about to erupt. They readied with surgical precision, bolstering defenses, checking every weapon and handing out rolls as a taut, humming focus bound them together into one unstoppable rhythm. Machio felt the room's heaviness, smiled and urged them to refresh themselves now, eat and gather strength for the coming battle. His calm, friendly presence eased the tension a little. They gathered around the crackling fire, feeding the flames and settling in for the night when the elf froze. Her keen ears snagged a strange, soft but relentless rustling. From far off a dull drumbeat swelled, steady and mounting into a war cry that ignited the advancing troops' morale as the enemy's raw energy and iron resolve crackled through the air. They spotted the enemy closing in and fired each other up for the fight, hearts pounding, minds razor-sharp with the looming danger. Jennifer sneered, could the enemy really muster 2,000 soldiers on that razor-thin isthmus they planned to cross? She didn't believe they could pull it off. Machio barked that they had to pull back to spare needless losses. He knew preserving their forces now would let them strike with everything when the moment came. Perched on the hill, the whole team stared down the enemy, dissecting every move with gazes sharp as knives, tension humming through them, muscles coiled to react the moment anything shifted. Time itself felt frozen. An hour bled away and they still clung to the hill, tired but unbowed. Dusk stretched shadows long and every muscle screamed for rest, yet not a single one let themselves relax. Machio snapped, "Are they even going to attack, or are we stuck in this endless wait?" His voice thrummed with impatience and coiled tension, desperate to know when the decisive battle would erupt. The elf's ears snagged on distant, whisper-thin screams and the faint clash of steel. She suspected the battle had already erupted and the enemy had started fighting without waiting for them. The room crackled as voices exploded. Everyone dissected the news, traded sharp opinions, and scrambled to reshape their next moves. Machio slipped into a trance of calculation, face hard as flint as he tore through the unfolding situation, shredding risks and sketching strategies in his head. The girls decided to bake bread. No real battle broke out that day, so the team retreated to the cave to rest, but the air crackled with tension. Everyone felt this calm was only a brief lull before the storm. Mouthful of bread, Mashio replayed the invasion of eastern Kenya in his head, dissecting how it all snapped into place and hunting for the lessons buried in the past. She dropped the bomb. Several traitors lurked in the castle, shredding their defenses and handing them defeat, and her revelation plunged their plans into darkness and sowed poisonous mistrust that turned danger inward. Suspicion burned in the elf's eyes as she accused traitors lurking in their ranks. She warned they could ruin the cause, and her alarm slammed into the room, snapping every head toward her as they scrambled to fathom how such betrayal could be possible. She insisted it was unlikely, forcing herself calm so panic wouldn't spread, and the team clung to trust and unity to keep fear from shredding their cohesion. Out of nowhere, Mashio roared that once this battle ended he'd become a noble, stunning everyone into silence as his sudden certainty sent their thoughts spinning, and that moment carved a new milestone into their shared journey. The girls warned him not to rush to conclusions, their words clipped and cautious, voices tight with worry for his safety. This fight wasn't over, the real battle still loomed. Mashio froze, then the memory that Healy was also a noble woman hit him like a spark, blasting him with confidence and raw inspiration, and sharpening his resolve to charge toward his goals as a new fire roared to life in his soul. He asked if any of them were already nobles who could share their hard-won experience. Machio reached for their knowledge, hungry for support, and that question sparked new bonds across the team. Till the elf and the short-haired girl thrust their hands up, proclaiming their noble blood, the shock rippled through the group, upending the team's balance and turning their every word into heavy, undeniable command. Mashio's jaw dropped. He couldn't believe it. The three girls were noblewomen, catapulting their team into a whole new league and unlocking a flood of opportunities. Jennifer clutched the bread like a lifeline, a bead of sweat tracing her cheek as tension and excitement crackled through her, calm on the surface, but inside anxiety and a fierce sense of responsibility roared. Mashio fired a sharp question across the room. What do the noblewomen do? The girls spun tales of nobles who lorded over sprawling lands, reared heirs at their knees, and charged into battle to maintain order and power, each story peeling back another surprising face of the nobility. He shut his eyes and demanded to know how nobles really operated, hungry to understand their true role. The girls answered bluntly, peeling back the curtain on each duty and daily routine. He gritted his teeth and vowed to handle it himself, sick of long conversations and desperate to focus on business. He needed to rest and steel himself for the trials ahead. They carved the night into shifts, each taking watch so someone was always on guard, keeping them sharp and safe in the dark. Dawn slammed in and Machio snapped awake to his colleague looming at his side, her gaze locked on something she'd already spotted. She shoved him upright and ordered him to move, her motion shouting a new danger. They sprint toward the scene, shoulder to shoulder. They found a dead boar, its body cinched in a crude snare, a grim warning that the enemy was already close and had begun to move. The young man snapped that it was only a wild boar, accidentally snagged in a tripwire and fighting to stay calm, and he urged the team to steady themselves while a cold dread warned him the danger was closing in. He jerked his head to the right and saw a girl stride in, asking when she'd managed to get to their camp. Her sudden arrival jolted his nerves and sharpened every sense. She locked eyes on the horizon and bellowed that the enemies were already bearing down, racing toward them, setting off a wave of alarm as the team slammed into defensive positions. Machio tensed, thrusting her hand toward the stream where the large enemy army lurked. His gaze snapped razor-sharp and determined. Time was running out. A vast host surged through the trees, disciplined and battle-ready. Their overwhelming numbers and razor-sharp coordination forced instant, desperate action. A masked man loomed among them, his gaze fixed on the distance, the enemy leader, a living emblem of their power whose mere presence sent cold fear through everyone and turned the attack into a grave, looming threat. They swung axes like thunder, cleaving trunks and hacking through the dense forest, every move driven by fierce, single-minded purpose. Machio caught sight of their activity and pressed for exactly what they planned, determined to gauge how big the threat was and what tactics the enemy was using, his voice calm but laced with caution. She blurted that the enemy planned to build a bridge over the obstacles to come straight at them. The tree cutting finally made sense, and dread flooded the entire team. The girls shoved a bento at Machio, scolding that you can't fight on an empty stomach, rattling off practical concerns, and begging him to eat so he'd have the strength to keep going. She whipped out smoked meat and nuts and started passing them around so everyone could eat and replenish their strength, a small but vital sign of support in that grim moment, and the team accepted it with grateful relief. Till her mouth full, asked Makia what they were doing next. Her eyes blazing with curiosity and fierce determination, she demanded the plan and stood ready to spring into action. They shot back, "I'll wait." Makio snarled that they'd unleash the monsters in battle, banking on their terrifying power to fight at their side, his gaze iron. He truly trusted this unorthodox weapon to work. The girls spun on him, demanding to know whether they'd really unleash monsters now, fear crackling in their voices at the thought of the unpredictable chaos that could follow. They drenched the air with baited scent, funneling the monsters into the exact spot to lock down a stronger defense. The enemy commander barked orders, the troops surged into a relentless offensive, and a savage clash erupted. The army charged like a storm, boots pounding as they surged ahead. An unexpected danger slammed into them. Thick, salt-soaked slime rolled over their bodies, locking their limbs as panic ripped through them. Suddenly, wild animals snapped to attention, their eyes locking onto them. They barreled in and unleashed a furious onslaught. The knights screamed and fought back, but the pandemonium swallowed their counterattacks. Winged monsters dove from the sky, compounding the threat as commanders barked orders. No retreat, fight to the last breath. The decisive battle had arrived. They tore into the fight, desperation burning in every strike. Swarming beetles and writhing plants attacked nonstop, piling fresh obstacles and deadly threats on them, so every minute became a merciless test of endurance and courage. Their leader roared he'd incinerate them all with sorcery, promising nothing but fire and ruin, and his words ignited panic, forcing the defenders to scramble and forge desperate new ways to resist. The boys' eyes went wide. Their commander was a real mage, so they tore up their old plans and huddled together. The fire forces were brutal, but they'd learned ways to stand against the blaze. They leveled their guns at the commander and fired, bullets screaming to shatter his spell mid-incantation. The elf snapped her bow to readiness, locked her gaze on the target, and every arrow she loosed bore the hope of salvation. She drew the bowstring back, locked her gaze, and let the arrow scream free. The instant the mage plunged into the spell, the world snapped into motion. Danger crackled around him, but the risk had to be taken. An arrow slammed into the mage, shredding his incantation and sending his enemies reeling. Suddenly, the tide of battle turned. His subordinates spotted the wound, and alarm surged through them as they realized their leader was in danger. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Mashio praised the elf, calling her a good girl, while she simmered with guilt, convinced she should have killed the mage instead of merely wounding him, and conflict warred in her eyes. The knights launched into a frantic search for the shooter's origin, hunting down his exact location, a make-or-break tactical question. The magician roared for his subordinates to throw themselves over him as a human shield and keep fighting. The commander scrambles to pull back, yanking his troops away in a desperate rescue maneuver. As the magician fled, a hairy man burst in and tore into him for running, exposing bitter rifts that splintered the enemy's structure. The knights hit the ground and spotted a small gang of strangers. Their sudden arrival ripped the certainty from the battle and left everything up in the air. Makio and his allies snapped awake to the truth. They were adventurers, a ragtag, chaotic force that could tip the course of events, but their intentions remained murky. Makio slammed the question at Sylvia. "Do you know these people?" Prying for answers, his voice a tight wire as he waited. Sylvia's confession, "They are my father's enemies," ripped out on a trembling breath. Fear clenched her voice as she sensed the danger closing in, and her words slammed the room into deadly seriousness. Revealed as the rebels' core, the gang stood grinning, primed for fresh plots and battles, a sure sign that brutal trials and fierce clashes still loomed. The rebels crashed into the knights, who admitted they didn't know how to proceed. Confusion knotted their brows and dismay hollowed their eyes. The road was blocked and they couldn't spot any safe path. The rebel leader glared at the knights, his gaze snapping first to their shoes, steely menace and iron resolve crackling in his stare, a silent warning of the consequences. Without warning, blood gushed out on the knights, spilling right at their feet. They froze, stunned and utterly baffled by how it had started, and the air thickened, a curse settling over the meeting place. They leaned in and their stomachs dropped. This wasn't human blood, but the ichor of monsters, its reek and raw power choking the air, a clear sign the enemy had bent dark forces to his own will. He barked in a cold, hard voice that anyone who tried to cross the bridge was doomed. The words landed like a death sentence. He wasn't joking, and was primed for a brutal confrontation. The knights froze, terror roaring in their chests as blades and spells descended on them. Fists balled, but crippling hesitation nailed them to the spot. The helmeted man with a shield barked that this wasn't a joke, and to steel themselves for the fiercest fight, his voice forged of iron as he readied to lead his warriors into battle. Makio sat on the hill, razor-focused, eyes locking onto every move unfolding below. He realized the soldier had changed. Every move wound tight with caution, and panic snapped through them in sudden bursts. Mashio watched monsters and plants mow down soldiers with shocking ease, turning the battlefield into a death trap for both sides. He knew this tactic was already changing the course of the conflict. He vowed to carve a safe corridor for their troops, guaranteeing the invasion's success. He needed fearless, battle-tested soldiers ready to charge ahead and clear the way. The soldiers confessed they no longer believed they could win, saw no chance of victory, and many fled in blind panic. Fear and doubt exploded through the ranks, crushing morale, plunging the lines into chaos and leaving them weakened. A soldier's boot hit a mine, the explosion shook everyone around. A thunderous roar drowned out all sound. The aftermath was brutal, and panic ripped through the ranks. Disbelief froze the long-haired man as the explosion lit the sky. Then a bear suddenly appeared nearby and slammed into the fleeing soldiers, its roar igniting panic and throwing the whole scene into brutal chaos. Explosions ripped across the area, each boom tightening a knot of dread in their chests. They could see the enemy bleeding heavy losses, but danger still loomed. Mashio admitted, breathless, that he'd been blindsided. He hadn't expected such a tense chain of events or the staggering scale of it all, and the shock ripped open a flood of new challenges. The girls seethed, denouncing the use of soldiers as pawns as cruel and grotesque, clinging to honor and justice even in war as their hearts ached for the lives at stake. Mashio snapped that sooner or later the enemy would swarm them, their numbers overwhelming, and a cold-eyed realist, he knew retreat was impossible, so they had to brace for one decisive, all-or-nothing battle. They huddled in a tight circle and tore the old plan apart, reforging it to meet the battle's new chaos. The fierce debate welded them together, sparking bold solutions and leaving them blazing with resolve and ready to strike. Sylvia's voice tore through the chaos as she shouted to the boys, trembling with raw fear. She felt the danger closing in, and her cry snapped everyone's focus to it. She spat it out, these were her father's killers, and that's why she swore to destroy them. He felt the fierce fire driving her, but he ordered her to bury the idea. He clocked the man with the skin draped over his shoulders as a walking wrecking ball, monstrously strong and flat-out dangerous, demanding respect and razor-sharp vigilance. His strange aura twisted the air and sent cold fear crawling up spines. Machio breathed, "I've never seen an aura this powerful," and the admission hit him like a warning. The upcoming battle would pit them against a ferocious opponent. Sylvia reeled as her plan fell apart, a lead weight settling on her heart, and she fretted over mounting delays and the looming uncertainty. Mashio slammed the plan down and demanded everyone stick to it, laser-focused on the goal. The girls backed him, voices sharp with resolve as they braced for action. He planted himself, gaze locked on the girls, while Sylvia hovered quietly at his back, watching and bolstering him. The air crackled with tension yet bound them together. He spotted Sylvia's sinking spirits and knew they'd sabotage their every move, so he swore to hold the team together. She breathed his name like a vow, as if weighing something vital, determination and hope blazing in her voice. Suddenly she shouted, "I've got an idea." Confidence flared in her eyes and inspiration crackled in her voice, and that instant became the turning point of their plans. Till and Jennifer heaved and strained, tugging the meat-laden cart as they battled to drag it faster. The cart towered in size, but the load burst past its limits again and again, the meat shoved into one massive mound. Weary but fierce, the girls heaved every scrap of meat they could scrounge onto a creaking cart, treating it as the linchpin of their plan and primed to guard and wield it with ruthless care. They crashed into the protagonist, who barked a razor-clear order to push south, straight into the heart of the forest, an unforgiving trail, but the only way to finish their mission. The girls set their hands on the cart again and braced for the journey ahead. Fatigue bit at them, but determination roared, so they pushed on as the cart crept forward, slow but sure. First, they'd gouge a U-shaped passage into the south side and heap the earth into a funnel, drawing the animals to the exact spot and locking down their every move. The whole plan depended on it. Next up, pelt the dead end with chunks of meat, baiting the air so the scent drags hungry animals in and turns the spot into a trap. Every toss must be surgical. A surge of animals, mostly mammals, sniffed the meat tucked in the dead end. It was bait to pull them into a crowd, and they leaned in, watching every move. A writhing heap of animals pressed together, too many to count, an astonishing jumble of species from tiny rodents to hulking predators, crowded so close they became one living mass. He watched from the side, razor-eyed as he sized up the scene. A green tiger, a dangerous lamia, a golden bat, and a mighty forest giant. He kept his gaze locked like a predator, missing not a single movement as he waited for the perfect moment, eyes razor-focused, reading every twitch and whisper of the wild. He shouted up to Heli, still perched on the mountain, demanding to know how the enemy was faring, desperate for fresh intel so he could adjust his moves with precision. Heli cut a silhouette against a sky churned with black smoke and narrated the devastation she watched. Bloodied soldiers sprinting through the forest, tumbling into hidden pitfalls as explosions ripped the air. Her elven gaze locked onto the scene. She knew the stalling act couldn't last. The traps laid earlier were bleeding their stores dry, and the next phase was about to erupt. Moments later, just as the elf had predicted, the preset traps suddenly cut out. The pits teemed with soldiers, and the hills fell silent. No more explosions, so the enemy pushed forward with no serious resistance. No trace of sleep marred the field, but they suspected the soldiers walking it had slipped into a stupor, and that only magnified the danger as a heavy, ominous hush fell over everything. Just then a long-haired man, imposing and brimming with determination, strode up to them. He hoisted a colossal sword onto his shoulder and barked for the bow-wielding girl and the towering, helmeted man in armor to charge forward. Soldiers carved a path through the undergrowth, and the unit surged deeper into the forest, seizing the chance to drive the operation forward without delay while every eye hunted the shadows. He barked for everyone to watch the local plants and creatures. This forest teemed with hidden dangers. One careless move could spell disaster, so they straightened, eyes razor sharp. Till siphoned crackling magic into her core, coiling it like a storm ready to burst as she readied to unleash her power. She stood like a coiled spring, every breath a countdown as she siphoned raw magic into herself, waiting for the signal. This plan depended on her. Jennifer's jaw dropped till it amassed that terrifying magic, but Mashio stayed radio silent and worry coiled cold in her gut. He melted into the leaves as the enemies thundered past, never spotting his cover. He stayed ghost silent and coiled, waiting. The moment to strike was seconds away. After the opponents backed off far enough, the protagonist sprang from his hiding place. He launched into his part of the plan with laser focus. The moment for decisive action had arrived. Maquio lashed out with a spell that severed the enemy's escape route, trapping them with no chance to flee, and his power would change the course of events. A massive mound of earth thundered down from above onto the dead end, burying the exit and cutting off any chance of retreat. The enemy lay pinned, every escape route sealed, and that daring move became the linchpin that won the operation. The hero had burned far more magic than he'd expected. He knew it. His energy was almost gone, yet he'd fulfilled his part of the plan. Fatigue clawed at him, but the mission was accomplished. When the explosions died down, the long-haired man went still, wary, sensing something was wrong, spotting the scene's shift and snapping into razor-sharp vigilance as his attention slammed against its limit. The protagonist's magic flared like a rallying cry to the girls, and Jennifer caught it in a heartbeat. She barked the command to Till to begin the action. Their timing snapped into place, and everything moved in perfect sync. The signal screamed, and Till snapped into action, unleashing her part of the plan. She unleashed her pent-up magic into the gathered animals. The enchantment exploded to life. Dread snapped through the animals. Sensing danger, they recoiled from the pulsing magical waves and bolted, panic erupting from every animal. The plan clicked into place as the animals were driven into a corner, their space shrinking until escape became impossible, packed into a dense, writhing mass. The space shrank until they had nowhere to run, so they huddled into a tighter knot to escape the flames, some clambering onto others' backs like people trying to climb away from instant death, fear etched on every face. They barreled into the dead end, yelling they had a mountain of work to tackle now as they realized the fight wasn't over and so much still had to be done, their voice blazing with determination. He vaulted to the top of the dead end for a clearer vantage, hunched on his perch, and watched the gathered animals, dissecting the scene with a razor-sharp, predatory stare. Jennifer locked onto him and shouted his name to snag his attention, fully aware his role was crucial in that moment, her voice urgent and steady with support. Sweat plastered to his skin from the run and the residue of the last spell. He leveled his hand and funneled every ounce of focus into unleashing the plan's next stage.